Hello, what's up? Welcome in, Obama Sweet Man. Good to see you. Happy Synth Friends Thursday. Always sad when I take the music out. I'm always like, oh, should I just leave it in the background for the whole stream? That would get old.
Yeah.
But it sets that vibe. So welcome in. We've got a new synth friend to meet and to hang out with, and someone who we've known a little bit, but we haven't had the chance to really, sit down with him in this capacity and have this kind of a conversation. So we're very excited about that. So I'm going to throw this command in. Our favorite command for Synth Friends is to shout out our Synth friend in all the places. So Robin Vincent is joining us from the UK today, hence why we're doing a little bit earlier. And he is also known as Molten Music Technology. So you may actually know him already and have been familiar with his work. He's got an amazing YouTube channel here we've linked. And on his Instagram, you can learn more. It says he crosses over a little personal, a little business, a little synthing, his DIY projects, all that kind of stuff. His journey with synths.
Always excited to see what he's up to.
Software and hardware. He also has a Patreon where you can support what he's doing. And his music on Bandcamp is awesome. I was listening to it all day yesterday. It's one of my favorite parts of Synth Friends is that we get a little bit deeper on everyone that we meet, and we get to hang out in their world of music to prepare for these streams. So that is always so fulfilling and fun for us. So thanks for being here. We are going to bring Robin in now so that we can get the chat going. But just want to say hello to everyone wherever you're tuning in from. We'd love to hear from you. Shout out kind of where you're tuning in from, and we'll give you a shout out as we boot up the old teleportation machine here, transmitter.
I shipped out an 8-second tape loop today. Wink, wink.
Wink, wink. Tape loops. We still have a few left of the batch that we found, and we definitely were inspired by our chat last week with DJ Dia, who encouraged us to do a tape loop DIY kit thing to do sort of...
It'll happen.
Anyone who wants to have it in their hands and know how, our system for making it, we can teach you that. It's a little tape loop talk. Also, just want to shout out that we did put our chat with Robin, who we're about to bring on, when we ran into him at Super Booth this year, all of our Super Booth interviews, all of our behind the scenes footage, all of our sort of demos of gear is up in our Vortex. So if you're a Vortex member, you have access to that. And if you're not, here, I'll drop the link before we get started. Get this out of the way. You're going to want to join the Vortex if you want to go deeper with, tutorials from the synth, live music, concerts that we're doing, tracks that we're putting out that we're not releasing anywhere else, all kinds of fun stuff related to, our intergalactic hub for all things that we do.
And we're about to ramp up, so...
Yeah, we just opened the doors for it, so it's just about to start getting filled with all kinds of fun stuff.
We promise that it's going to get way more intense than it is now.
Ooh, yeah, you better get in there and strap in, because things are about to get crazy. All right, without further ado, let me open the door on the teleportation machine and let Robin in. All right. In just a moment, we are going to bring Robin on the live and make sure that our connection is still working. All right, Robin, we've got you on the stream. Can you hear us? Can you see us?
I can. You're all coming through loud and clear over there in America.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us all the way from the UK.
Oh, it's lovely. It is lovely. It is evening time over here. I believe you're in the middle of the afternoon somewhere in some other day.
Yes, exactly. It's like we're time travelers, somehow figuring out how to send our beacons out and sync up, even though we're in different orbits. I always love that. That's, one of my favorite things about doing this show is that we kind of leave the day open. So whoever we connect with, wherever they are in the world, we can kind of sync up with the time. And, makes us more able to connect with more people all over the globe. So that's a really cool part of what we get to do. And you're no stranger to that.
As long as the hours are reasonable for us.
Yeah, we can push it sometimes. But
Yeah.
welcome in. Let's make sure everyone knows who you are. Welcome. This is Robin Vincent, aka Molten Modular, Molten Music Technology. We dropped your links in the chat, so everyone should be kind of caught up on where to connect with you deeper and what you're up to. But we want to get into it. Love to know, kind of what we like to start with is your synth origin story, sort of the earliest kind of memory you have of what really drew you into this world of eclectic sound explorations.
Yeah, that's an interesting question that can go very, very far, because I mean I'm 52 now, and there's a lot of journey has been journeyed through that time. So it depends on where you'd like to start. I mean, I could say that when I was a kid, when I was very small, I was very much into electronic music. I'm not entirely sure where it came from. I mean, and this was the 1970s and into the 1980s, and at that time I was into bands like Sky and Vangelis and Jean-Michel Jarre, I suppose. Sort of came along in the 80s a bit more. And I was very much into instrumental music. In fact, the very first album that I bought, which wasn't electronic at all, but was an instrumental album called The Greatest War Movie Themes. So things like 633 Squadron and The Great Escape, classical cinematic instrumental music. And that was something that always appealed to me. And then I had to learn piano for some reason. I don't remember. My parents were just mean, I think. And they made me go and see this old lady, and I had to sit there and try to plink out things. But then my dad ended up picking up a Technics little home keyboard, and that was just completely revolutionary as far as I was concerned. It suddenly had these pad sounds, and it had drums, and you could like play things on one finger and it will follow you about, all this automatic accompaniment going on in very sort of simplistic rumbas and samba kind of ways. And that's when I started thinking, well, this is actually interesting, and I could start writing my own stuff, and I can start doing things on it. And that was definitely the sort of the genesis of it, I think. And I always, from that point, considered myself a keyboard player, whatever you want to call it. And then a couple of years later, he picked up a DX100. He just came home with it. I have no idea why.
Who spent more time on it?
Yeah. And so this DX100 sat perfectly on top of the Technics. I think it was an SX200. I'm sure someone will be able to point out what it is if it's in that kind of era. But it was, so you had this perfect combo of this Yamaha DX100 on the top, little FM synth, and this home keyboard underneath that had this fabulous sort of sumptuous brass sound. Our brass is commonly not seen as a fantastic sound, a bit stabby, but when you put the chorus on, this turned into sort of this wash of modulating pad synthy sounds, which was just great. So I'd have that going, and you could program in chords and stuff, and it would play that around. And I'd put a plectrum under one of the keys, because I was also dabbling in other things, and I put a plectrum under one of the keys, and that would hold that down, and it would play that round. And I could then play little leady bits on obviously the pan flute I would play on the DX100 on the top. And I was playing, instrumental Vangelis style music, I suppose. And this would have been, well, I can't remember when the DX100 came out now, but early 80s, I would say. Sort of before I then discovered pop music and realized that everybody was doing this kind of thing. But so that was my early start. Would
you say that you spent more time on the keyboard than he did?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, he's a church organist essentially.
Oh, okay.
And that was also a heavy influence. So I ended up, as soon as I could play more than a note, we were playing together in church on Sunday mornings, and we had this little thing go. He'd play on the piano, and I would have the synths inside, which is always an odd thing in an English village Church of England church. It was slightly odd. Yeah, but it was good. There is some video that I need to dig out, and I know my dad's got it on DVD, so that's a headache trying to turn that into something usable. But I must find that, because there's a little piece where we played a Christmas number together that I have in me with a terrible haircut and a terrible jumper and that sort of thing. So that was where I started. Although I then very quickly went off onto a massive digital. I mean, not that the DX100 is digital, of course, but I went down a sort of a Fairlight route, and that seemed to be everything. The advancement in technologies moving suddenly from these rubbishy old analog synthesizers that no one was really interested in onto this, Peter Gabriel, Paul Hardcastle, Harold Faltermeyer, all these kind of bigger names that were growing out, all of this production that was growing out of Fairlight and sampling technology. And so that sort of took me on a whoosh, I think, after starting on a smaller synthesizer. And that's all I thought about and wanted. And that manifested itself as I had a Commodore 64 sampler, is what I had. So the Commodore 64 computer, which was brilliant, that I played games on all the time. And you had this sampling software where it would do about, I think, 1.6 seconds. So you could just about sample, and you could split that into 4. So you could just about sample a drum kit and make a drum kit on it. And and that was great. And I had a double tape deck, and I was overdubbing, cassette on cassette, and listening with horror as my first track disappeared into the mush, and laying other things on top and trying to understand sound. How is this happening? Why do these things disappear? And then strange glitches and wobbles and all the weirdness that brought cassette that cassette brought with it.
And now you'd be posting that to Instagram and saying, listen to this cool disintegration effect I have going on.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then I was just trying to fix it. I mean, I spent a lot of time wrestling with auto recording levels, because a lot of gear had just automatic recording levels, which means you would start off with something twinkly and you'd suddenly get this as it tried to pull everything up and push everything down as other instruments came in. It was just a horrible mess, really. But you were making music, man. I was absolutely making music, and
Absolutely.
that was fantastic. But I had to leave it all behind when I left home at about 18. I got a guitar for my 18th birthday and ran off with that. So I then had a non-synth time for a few years. Yeah. So yeah, that's the earliest. I mean, I can keep on going.
I know, right? Let's just tell your whole life story through synths. No, I love it. That was really cool because it clearly lays the groundwork, right, for kind of building to, if we jump to where you are now, and sort of the origins of molten music technology and how that even came about.
Well, I guess my story continues, I suppose, later on. I mean, I had planned to go and do music technology as a degree. And I mean, my ultimate aim at all of these points was to get into the BBC Radiophonic Workshop. That was the only place for me. I had albums of sound effects that they had made. I loved the whole Doctor Who thing, all of that. That was my purpose. My aim was to work at that place, even if it didn't really exist anymore. I wasn't really sure at that time, but that was the plan. So I felt before I got to university age, I was looking into courses and what I could do. And the only course that existed at that time, this is about 84, was electronics for the music industry, which is an HND, it would be, so that's not a university degree. It would be well, for us, it's an A-level thing, which I think is high school for you, 16 to 18 level. And it was an HND in electronics. And it was at the London College of Furniture, which is a strange destination, but it's the only place that did it. And the big thing about them was they had a Fairlight, and so that's where I wanted to go. And it was kind of the only course of its time. In these days, music technology courses are all over the place. You can do one wherever you like, but that was the only one that I was aware of. But I wanted to do my A-levels first, so I thought I'd come back to it later. So I then did my A-levels, which I completely flunked, and so was unable to continue any kind of education at that point. And so I went off and did something else. I just thought, sod this, I'll go and do something else. But after a few years, I came back, and it had since been turned into a degree course, and I could then get on it because I was a mature student. I had lived a couple of years in the real world, and that meant my A-levels didn't count for shit at that point, and I could just turn up and go, I'm a wizened old man at the age of 22. and so they let you straight on, which was great. And so I did this degree course, and it involved electronics, of course, but it also involved the physics of sound, sound engineering. They had sound tools, not Pro Tools. Pro Tools wasn't available yet. They had the precursor to that, Sound Tools, which is digital, so I was interested in that. They had the Fairlight, of course, which we never got a chance to play on. They had a Moog Modular, which was great, that I ignored mostly at that time. And you know, things were starting. So this was the 90s. So email started while I was at university. You know, the internet came into being while I was at university. And email started, news groups started. You started getting information from places and hooking up with things, which was quite interesting. But the main focus of my course, what I chose to do, my avenue through, was actually Baroque folk instruments, and I built keyless flutes.
Whoa!
Simply because I found it absolutely fascinating. I had no previous interest. No, I had no previous interest in wind instruments when I played brass at school. But I did a module where I built a recorder, you know, a Baroque recorder, I guess, with nice beading down. It was all made of wood, and it was all done on lathe work, and it was just such a beautiful thing to do that I did sort of that with electronics was sort of slashed into my course. And I spent a couple of years making flutes, which was just beautiful. That, and then I made a pitch to MIDI converter for it, and was able to play a Korg M1 with my flute. So that was that was my so what was I talking about this? Oh yeah, no, I was trying to get beyond this. This is where I was trying to get
so we're getting to the origins of molten music.
Yeah, the origin. So
yes, I love it.
Then after that, after getting my degree, and I did very well, which is great. I thoroughly had a wonderful time, and didn't know what to do afterwards. Sort of fussed about a little bit, and then decided to get a job at a music shop. So I thought, you know, that'll tide me over for a little while. So I joined this music shop called Turnkey, which is in the middle of London, where I was living at the time. And it kind of was the biggest music shop of its kind, certainly in Europe at that time. And it was kind of it was almost like an abusive place to work, in that they traded very much on your enthusiasm for the gear. They knew you loved the gear. You knew that's why you were there, and that you would pretty much do anything to keep that job. And because of that, you know, the terms and conditions of your employment were pretty ropey, to say the least. But
I actually went there in 1998, the first time that I ever visited England.
Ace, I would have been there. I would have been on the shop floor feeling miserable.
Wow. I think I bought a Moog sweatshirt, like a hoodie, from, I don't think it was at Turnkey. It was like at a shop near there. It was like at another music store, because I think there was a few music stores near there.
Yeah,
if I'm not
definitely.
mistaken.
Yeah, it was just down from Denmark Street, which was a very famous guitar street of guitar shops, and there was
I think it was a guitar shop.
Whoa, that's wild.
Yeah.
I was amazed because, like, for me, you know, I grew up with looking at Future Music magazine, and I would pay the big bucks for it in the U.S. To, you know, not to get it imported necessarily, but to buy it at like Barnes and Noble. It was like $23 or something like that, and I would look at the 90s ads and, you know, look at these shops and think like, yeah, if I go to England someday, like, I'm definitely going to go to these like super like keyboardy shops, you know, with samplers and sample libraries and like all this crazy stuff that you can't really get at the music stores in the US. So it was kind of like a big deal for me to have gone there. And so it's crazy that you worked there. Like, and I actually didn't even remember the name of the place until you just mentioned it. Story, yeah, I've never told you this story. It was just a random little fact.
I do remember that Milk sweatshirt though.
Yeah.
You do remember that? Yeah, I had that still when we first met. That's crazy. Yeah. Anyway.
Hello to the chat, by the way. Madcap Modular, first time chat. Store. Must be someone that knows you, Robin.
Oh yeah. Hey, how you doing?
And Control Alt, I see you're listening in the car. Be safe. Make mistakes, welcome in. Hi friends. Good to see you. You want an envelope follower with your pitch tracker to get more expression. I'm not sure what that's specifically was referring to, but it sounds like a good idea. Hello, Orion. Welcome
pitch to MIDI conversion. Pitch to MIDI conversion, maybe on the flute. Yeah, possibly.
Oh, on the flute.
Yeah, I can't remember. I lost the box.
We've gone down all these fun threads now, but so at this point, The music shop sounds like it was
Mm.
a hub of some things that were outside of the norm, right? Like when we think of music shops in that era, it is very guitar based, and maybe
Yeah.
there's some keyboards, but not maybe software side or sampling
And
stuff.
electronic,
Well,
I mean, EDM was
yeah.
so hot at the time. Like, I mean, it was literally like the thing. So I could just imagine you would have, you know, celebrities coming through there constantly.
Fun encounters in there.
Buying
At all
kinds
Yeah.
of stuff.
To outweigh the misery.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I think, I mean, Turnkey would get through a lot of stuff. I mean, there was a lot of good people who went through there. But I think you had to, there's like a hump you had to get over in order to stick at it. You had to be a bit sort of bloody minded and just, you know, grit your teeth and get through the bewilderment. Because what happens as a shop floor salesperson is that even on your first day, someone will come in from the outside and go, oh, right, yeah, can you tell me about the new Pro Tools system and how I'm going to interface that with my, you know, with my open reel tape machine? And you're going, I had a 4-track once. Hang on, let me see if I can figure that out for you. So you basically had to blag your way through everything because you started off not knowing anything. The assumption when you walk into a music shop is that the person you're talking to knows anything at all. And, you know, when I started, I really didn't. I thought I did, but I really didn't. I was not prepared for the range of questions that you would get about every single subject, from microphones to compressors to all this stuff that I'd never used. You know, I'd never worked in a studio. There was almost like there's an assumption from the customer that you would be a professional person who was recording the Beatles, you know, last week at Abbey Road. And it's like, well, no, I don't know anything about this stuff. But hey, I've got a price list. And, you know, I make commission. So what do you want? Let me get it for you. So, you know, it took a little bit of working out. And, but my role there was as the sort of PC specialist. They had Mac people because they had Apple Macs, Windows. So this is 96. So Windows 95 had come along. Windows was kind of getting usable.
That was the year.
Excuse me. Yeah, and I had a computer for a number of years. I was a bit of a computery nerdy type person, and that was my angle in going to work with them. So I would start doing the music software side, and of course that was at the perfect time because everything at that point was going software, the whole lot. So I had to learn lots of different bits of software, and I became very quickly an expert on how you get this stuff to work on Windows, because it was hard, you know, getting MIDI to work, getting that MIDI joystick port on the back of your computer, getting that into MIDI, getting software to run, getting the two things to communicate with each other. How do you install audio interfaces? I mean, this is pre-ASIO as well. And how you cope with that sort of 1.5 second latency, how you deal with that. But then, of course, there's lots of SMPTE stuff, lots of striping tape. How do you get tape and computers to run with each other? You know, there was a lot of hard work done in trying to get any of this stuff to function.
Yes.
Do you remember Hubie's loopback device?
Oh, yeah, most definitely.
I haven't even thought about that forever.
Yeah, I mean, because I had the one piece of gear I had when I turned up at the shop, I had an SW60, which was the Yamaha little synth card in the back of my computer, and you use Hubie's loopback in order to get to that from your sequencer, whatever it was I was using. Can't quite remember now, but anyway, something along those lines. So all this fiddly faffing around, but at the same time, every 3-4 months, this massive move forward would happen, whether it's the invention of VST or the introduction of Rebirth, or some other software synth come along. Native Instruments came into being, you know.
They took over.
Arturia, I remember trying to sell Arturia's first product, which was called Storm, which was this sort of horrible Rebirth clone set in a house, I think, and it had not real obviously, but 3D turntables in one of the rooms that you could go wicka 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 with your mouse and speed things up and slow things down. I mean, it was terrible really, but it's where they started before they started doing the emulations of Moogs and stuff. So all of that I was trying to cope with and sort out, and so that became my level of expertise. But at the same time, I had a side job if I had to maintain all the synths that are on the demo rack. And so at this time, I'm trying to remember what synths there were. There was a Kawai K5000, trying to visualize my rack that I had, because at the end of every day they were all wrecked because people would I don't know what they would do really. I guess my only assumption is they would come in with a piece of wood and thrash them and then take the headphones and go and throw those about, because they were broken all the time.
That's amazing.
You were trying to get everything back together to work. Anyway, so K5000, there was a prophecy at the top. There was a Raven, Quasimidi Raven, that was a classic. JP8000, things along those sorts of lines. So kind of a time when it's a little bit too late for the featureless digital synth, so we'd moved into Trinities and stuff as opposed to the M1s. So things had started to come back as far as control surface goes, but most of it we were kind of ignoring. We had racks and racks of samplers, but the weird thing was with the samplers like the S2000s, S3000s, and the EMU samplers, is that they were there for a year and then they were gone. They were just gone almost overnight. It was like, we no longer need these because my computer is now doing tons and tons of it, and they just disappeared. It was almost strange, very, very strange, because it was the setup. People would come in after a little studio setup and you'd sell them a sampler and a mixer and a 4-track, and that would be their gear, and they'd go off with that and a pair of headphones and they'd be making music. But that very quickly, over the course of a year, I suppose, at the end of the 90s, just changed into computers. So from that point, we then came up with this idea that supporting computers making music was hard, because you had no idea what the computers were like. The Mac department, who were next door to me, or the other guy over there, he was fine, because there's only one Mac, there's only one Apple, that's all they have to support. They just have to know how that works and you're off. Whereas everyone who phoned up me saying, oh, I've got a problem, they had a different computer with different specs and different things and stuff. So we decided that the only way we could carry this forward was to make our own computer. And so we did that badly for a little while. And then we decided to do it properly. And we came up with this Carillon Audio Systems idea, which was this custom made chassis. Essentially, it's the same computer inside that everybody else had, but the chassis was this custom, beautifully made case. And we tried to make it quiet, and we tried to make it fast, and we tried to make it stable. And at the time, we were sort of the first people to do that. So we had all sorts of enclosures for drives, very quiet running fans, and we were able to produce this computer, which was just beautiful. And it was designed for audio, and it worked. And the reason that it worked is that we would build it and we would install everything. So we'd install Cubase, we'd install the audio interface, we'd test it all out. It all worked. You deliver it to the customer and it would work. And it was brilliant. And that was awesome for a couple of years. We did a really good job on that for a little while. And
I remember those as well.
Yeah, okay. And so from there and so from there I was essentially the person who got all that to work. I mean, we had a team of people, but I was sort of in charge of getting it to function. And we did some NAMs as well. We did a couple of NAMs shows with that, which was a lot of fun.
That's very cool.
And after so long, I mean, there was a few things that happened. The guy who owned Turnkey died quite unexpectedly, and he was kind of the heart of the place, really. And when he left it, then his wife didn't really want to hang on to the company, and so it got sold to another music shop. So the staff changed, and the ethos changed a bit, and it felt like a good time to get out. So that was in about 2005, I think. I decided to get out. And after, I've been there about 10 years, I think.
Yeah, that's quite a journey.
Yeah. And so I then decided, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to become a rock star. So that was my next plan.
Always have a plan. I love it.
Yeah, always have a plan. So I decided so what happened is I got married, and much to the horror of my in-laws, I then immediately gave up work.
Oh yes, great timing.
Yeah, great timing. And so that my wife Mariah could support me in her little flat. And I took sort of a year off to write the album, was the plan.
Oh, I see. Gotcha. Welcome
So
in,
this
Mr.
was
Spock, by the way. I see there's a whole conversation and debate going about tape hiss right now and some tape saturation, which I'm just going to let that happen because you know how we feel about it. Anyway.
but I won't drag this out too much longer.
No, we
So
love
from
it.
there,
Keep going.
okay, so I wasn't sure what to do exactly in terms of what to do. So I've been in plenty of indie bands over the years. I've played in folk clubs, I've played like folk duos, guitar and stuff, played guitar in bands. But now I was there with my computer, a copy of Logic, because Logic ran on Windows in those days. And
I didn't know that.
yeah. And so I started, coming up with my own bits and pieces. And I'd worked, try to get myself in the right order. I'd worked with a few singers as well, sort of producing some stuff and letting them sing over the top. But at this point, I'd kind of got to trying to find something purposeful to do. And so what I ended up was I started working on some ambient music, which then turned into meditation music. And because of I have a religious bone going through me somewhere, I ended up doing sort of scripture meditations. So meditations on particular Bible verses that I thought would be interesting. Because I was very much in a religious space at that time, but I'm a very I'm a square peg in a round religious hole. There's no, I don't fit into what people normally do in religious Christian circles. I don't. I'm like a porcupine in the soft marshmallow of modern Christianity. I don't know. I rub it up the wrong way and I break things. And so I'm always trying to find other ways of doing things. And what I found particularly difficult was being able to spend any time with the Bible as I was told I was supposed to. And I found that immensely difficult. But what I found was that through music, I could transform myself. The best way to explain, I don't know if it's a good way to explain it, was that I had kind of an epiphany or a road to Damascus moment even in a music shop, in a record shop in London. It was a shop called FOP, I think, and at Cambridge Circus. And I was just in there fiddling, looking through racks of CDs, of course, at that time. And this track came on, which was, I think it's, oh, come on, think brain, Polyphonic Spree. And
threads continue.
Just out of nowhere, it was from not the Hudsucker Proxy movie. It was a movie soundtrack that was done by this guy Elliot something, who then died, and then the Polyphonic Spree took over. It doesn't matter. There's this really long track on that particular album which goes on for like 20 minutes, and it's the same thing over and over again. And I was in this record shop and this came on, and after a couple of minutes you thought, this is just doing the same thing over and over again, but it's really nice. And it was almost as if this soft blanket of petals and peace just fell over this chaotic record shop over a period of like 15-20 minutes, and the whole place just seemed to sigh, and you could feel it. Everyone was smiling, looking at each other, and this sound was just going round and round. It's kind of, I mean, the music in it, it sounds like there's an accordion, I think, there somewhere, squeezing backwards and forwards. So it's very breathy, very like a breathe, and the whole place just changed. And I came out of there thinking, that was just amazing. I feel completely transformed just by this very simple piece of music. And that very much inspired me to think that I could use music like that to teleport myself, which is obvious really when you think about it. And there's no doubt I would have done it before, but it was just so obvious in that moment that music is so transformational that you could use it in all manner of things. I don't have to write frivolous pop music, although I could. I don't have to write angry indie songs. I could actually be transformed. And so I endeavored to write an album which was this sort of ambient, computer based, because that's what I had, computer based electronic album that I then read threads of scripture through, the idea being that I could sit back for 20 minutes, listen to this piece of music, and have these words wash over me in the hope that they would be useful, I suppose. And it was cool. It was very cool. I loved it. I had a thoroughly good time. I took it to some festivals. and did it sort of live and kept that going for a little while. I've done three, and then I did one with at some point I became very self-conscious about it, and I did a whole album of sort of the best of the rest without any of the words. So I didn't have to feel self-conscious about the religiosity of it, and I could tell my non-religious friends, hey, I've got this nice piece of music out, and that's very cool. And actually that's the one that I spoke to you about, that I hope to remaster through the there we go, through that.
Yes.
That thing there.
Yes, I see it back there.
Yeah. So that was my creativity at that point, which was awesome, but ultimately I had to go back to work because nobody was going to buy it.
Right. I see.
So at that point I went back to building computers for studios, and this was under a guy I'd met in the States who had run the American version of Carillon for a bit. And this was a guy called Bill who had a company called Rain Recording. And for a few years, I built computers under his name, under the Rain Recording name, and was the UK outlet for that, and continued to build computers. It just came to a point where it was no longer working properly, and the communication difficulty with being in touch with the States and being over here very much on my own, it kind of felt like I was doing it by myself. And so it seemed to make sense to me to therefore do it by myself. And so it was at that point that I sort of overnight gave birth to Molten Music Technology, which of course, I mean, the word molten comes from that original album, which was called Molten Meditation. And molten, if anybody's interested, comes from a sermon from Spurgeon, I've got that right, who's an old theologian, where he talks about hearts turning to molten lead through meditation. And so that's where I took that word and put that into Molten Meditation, which has then become Molten Music Technology and Molten Modular and whatever else I can come up with. So it's now almost 10 years. It's 10 years this year, actually, that I started Molten Music Technology. And I was able to start. Thank you. I was able to start building computers under my own name and sort of building that reputation. And and that worked for, how long ago was that? That worked for about 4. No, see, that's the thing. I kid myself that it worked. It never worked. It never really worked. I was never able to pay myself a proper wage. I was working my nuts off, building flipping computers for people, dealing with the all of the hardware, all of the stock, building things, putting them together, sending them out, supporting them, repairing them, getting them back, sending them. I mean, I made great computers, but they're still computers, and they're still a bit flaky at the end of the day. And I could never quite charge enough. What I should have done is charge a lot more, but I just didn't believe that they would sell. I had to try to find the spot that it would work. And it was really, really very difficult. And then business we had the crash in 2016, was it? I can't remember. Which one? I don't know. There's so many of them. Some financial problems, and like the phone stopped ringing for months, and the orders was just dripping and dripping, and I just couldn't. It was just not sustainable. And sort of sadly, I had this one big order which was going to keep me going for a couple more months, which was a huge order that I put together, built the whole thing, and the guy pulled out right at the last moment. And there's nothing I could do about it. And it almost sunk me. And at that point, I just had to think there has to be something else that I have to be doing something else. This is, this is no longer going to work. So by then I'd already started doing a little bit of writing for people. I'd done a little bit of writing for Sound on Sound and Future Music, funnily enough, over the years, little bits and pieces. And I'd already built a little bit of a YouTube channel through doing demonstrations of bits and pieces. And one thing I had started was a lot of videos or video series on the Surface, the Microsoft Surface product, this sort of thing. Little mini computer, which I thought was a great little platform, because one thing I couldn't do is supply laptops. It's impossible, because there's no way to guarantee that a laptop's going to work for music. It has all sorts of weird power saving stuff built into it that makes it really, really difficult to support and maintain, and you can never get the same one twice. So when that came out, I thought, well, this is actually the closest to an Apple product we're going to get, where it's something that will be consistent and each one will be the same. And so wouldn't it be great if that could run music software? And maybe I should find out. And
Well, how intuitive.
yes. And so I got hold of one from the Surface Pro 3. That seemed to work really well, and it really helped with my YouTube channel and building a following on really investigating software and getting virtual instruments to run and getting audio to run, and also using a very creative touch interface, which nothing else had. I mean, there was the iPad, of course, but nothing ran on the iPad. It's better. It's better these days, but at that time, you couldn't do any serious music on an iPad. Whereas on the Surface, you could flip and run Pro Tools and Studio One and everything else.
Yeah,
so
all that stuff.
Yeah. So it was very, very promising. And that's sort of kickstarted my YouTube channel. I think mostly was my focus on that, and also resulted. I got invited to the launch of one of the two launches over in New York from Microsoft, which was great. So I was having an impact, and I was actually getting to talk to the people who designed the stuff, which was very exciting. But none of that actually got anywhere. But it was nice. It was really nice for a little while. It's just the number of barriers there are between you as a consumer and the person who's writing the audio driver kernels. That is, you cannot get through to them, and there's no way of explaining to them how latency is a problem. Latency is not a problem in any other world other than ours. And it's a very difficult thing to get across, particularly as I'd spent a lot of time telling people to turn off all of those stats and data stuff from your computer that sends off to Microsoft to tell them how your system's doing, because that was one of the tweaks that you do. Don't make sure you turn off all that stuff about data reporting. That's terrible. That's going to slow your system down. And so because of that, Microsoft had no idea that we were having any problems, that we were running this kind of software, because they had no data on it. They just literally had no data on it. So we really shot ourselves in the foot with that
makes sense.
Yeah, but hey. So I guess we should probably take a break and talk about something else in a minute and come back to this. Otherwise, I feel like I'm going to exhaust everybody.
We definitely got deep on all of the
but so I came to a point where the computer thing was no longer working. The Surface thing was interesting, but so the YouTube channel was interesting, and that seemed to be a place where I could perhaps, I think by that point I got through me 10,000, so it was monetized and was starting to get adverts and starting to get interest. So that was definitely a possibility. I had writing on the go, which was sort of could possibly work. So I was looking that I could just stop making computers, which I think I'm going to have to do. So that was 2016, 2017, something like that. Wow. So that's the point at which I then return to what has now become where I am now, I think. So how are you anyway?
Yeah. Thank you so much. I know, as someone who hosts their own show, it's hard to sometimes sit in that interview chair and be the one answering questions. But I love that arc was perfectly told without any preparation, just so everyone knows. We don't let anyone prepare for these. So.
I kept wanting to say, and then modular.
I know, right? I think we're ready to jump in. I just want to see if there's... Mr. Spock says they still do music on their iPad 1, and I'm going to need some follow-up on that, Mr. Spock, what that even means. Oh, the loudness wars. Oh, God.
I did use an iPad for video, because part of one of the things that I did with my album is I would do weird services in churches, and so I was doing a lot of stuff with projections, and at one point I was using sort of two iPads, I think, that overlaid each other up against the wall of a massive inside of the nave of a church, those sorts of things going on. Very much into lights and projections and animated stuff and graphics and movement and all those sorts of things very much blending together, I think. So yeah, iPad's definitely got its place. and I know plenty of people who use them properly for all sorts of interesting things. Just I don't have anything beyond mine. Is a iPad 3, I think, so it doesn't run anything anymore, sadly.
Yeah. Oh gosh, we could have a whole conversation about that.
Yeah.
The forced the obsolescence.
About 10 years ago, I joined a band when we were living in Los
Yes.
Angeles, and the first gig that I played with them happened to be opening for the Polyphonic Spree.
Really?
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Did a couple shows with them.
Yeah.
Got to do like a little mini run.
It was sort of what sold me on joining the band, you know, like when they were like, hey, you know, we really want you to play bass for us. And I'm like, oh, I'm pretty busy, you know, like I got a job. And they were like, well, and the first couple gigs were open for the Polyphonic Spree. I was like, oh, really?
I think we can make that work.
Yeah, I think I can make that happen. I think I can figure that out.
Yeah, no, they're a magical bunch of weirdos.
Oh
it's
yeah, that was a
fantastic
wild experience. Seeing them like arrive in their white robes and you know, just the whole vibe, just the way they run things. And
I don't know the name of the lead singer, but they definitely treated him like kind of like a cult leader of sorts. Like they like.
It's a little tongue in cheek, but it's also real.
You couldn't get to him. Like he was kind of like in his own quarters, and like several members of the band were sort of like hovering around him.
Oh yeah, bringing him his food and stuff.
And like you'd have to like
get
through some of them to like talk to him.
He was like a choir director as well.
Yeah. They respect. There was definitely like I felt like there was like a system of checks and balances like in place to keep everybody in order.
Yeah, that's a lot of people to manage. And
they've been
it's
a little triggering.
For like 15 years or something. They just like never have stopped.
Yeah.
So it's a wild thing.
It is.
But I just couldn't help like mention that synchronicity. I was like, wow, really? Like that was your experience? Like
that was your awakening.
Yeah.
It was. Yeah. As I say, it's a little bit triggering because it does feed into. I mean, particularly at the moment, there's a lot of scandal around evangelical modern churches.
Sure.
Hillsong and Soul Survivor over here in the UK. There's lots of problems have come out, but there's always been weirdness, you know. And one of the things that absolutely influenced me was this thing in the UK called the 9 o'clock service. I don't know if it ever got heard of in the States, but it was a completely revolutionary way of doing church, which was fantastic. I absolutely loved it. I went to some of their services at a festival called Greenbelt, where I would later play with my album. But when I was a teenager, they were doing services inside like a big top, and it was just full immersion, sort of a sensory experience. So they were using projectors, cine projectors, you know, this was before digital film, I suppose. So cine projectors of all sorts of images going on all the time. This amazing music, which was, you know, techno music, early 90s techno music, but also with some live instruments. It was this huge sound, and you were bouncing up and down, and it was all supposed to be singing to Jesus and marvelous stuff going on. And it was, again, one of these transformational moments where you just thought, good Lord, this is extraordinary. But I mean, sadly, it turns out that the guy who was in charge essentially had created this kind of goth chick harem for himself, which, I mean, on one level sounds awesome. I mean, how on earth did he manage to do that? That's every kid's dream at that particular time. But, you know, he somehow managed to pull it off, where he had this, he was surrounded by all these very enabling people who were taken in by his charismatic nature and, you know, the promise of religion and the promise of what this could be and the excitement of it. And it absolutely sort of sucks in all this creativity from this from Sheffield, where it's originated, and all these people were sort of pulled together to create this awesome thing, which then the front guy just abused. And and you just
it's almost like history keeps repeating.
I know. And here we are again. It happens again and again and again. I don't understand why we don't get it. And it's a shame, because there's such a level of creativity that comes from these places. Yeah, that has always come from church. You know, it's always poured out, whether it's gospel, whether it's I don't know, however far you want to go back, classical music.
Prince, Whitney Houston, you know, like they all got their start in church.
Absolutely.
We
It's
saw the
such a
Hillsong documentary,
Yeah,
so
we're
we're
pretty
aware
caught up.
of the
Pretty
current
up to
culture
speed.
and how it can go awry. But
Yeah, have our own experiences as well. But
yeah.
but it makes me think about just the idea of those spaces and that they're almost like primed with this energy. And then something that we've been experiencing here in the States is something called ambient church, which is a series of concerts in churches where they do projection mapping. So like they're using sort of the stained glass structure, but they're projecting different kind of light shows or visuals onto it, and you're in this like space that has that sort of energy of like people have meditated in here, there's been sort of an intentionality brought forth, and then you have like Suzanne Ciani or Malcolm Clark or you name it, playing on these massive systems, right? Because usually these spaces also have good audio equipment, and there's just been an investment in that. So like the acoustics are amazing, and that's not something you would normally experience, and you wouldn't go to a festival and experience that. So it's a very singular type of thing. But when I was living in New York, I was going to these shows, and I think they're doing them in LA and Chicago, and they're just kind of starting to spread around. But it's sort of like a concept that you can take anywhere. But I imagine, especially in the UK, the types of churches and spaces there are even older and have more of that sort of sort of
absolutely
vibrancy.
Yeah, I mean, I did for a couple of years I sort of had a residency at Norwich Cathedral, and it was once every month or once every couple of months, me and a couple of friends, couple of priests, funnily enough, would put on something we called Soul Circus, and it was I guess an alternative worship event, but we just explored all sorts of different ideas and concepts through art, through dance, through visuals, through music. It was a brilliant time, and there was you had this sense that these walls have heard 1,000 years of prayer, 1,000 years of singing. And the fact that a cathedral is actually built as a worship machine, it's not just a space, it has a flow to it, and there's all sorts of different places in it that you can journey around it as part of what's going on, rather than just sitting in a thing and singing some songs. You could be in this chapel and then that chapel or this space, and it has a different feel and a different reason, and there's something in the movement between these places. You're not just, let's just amble over here. No, we're going to process through this bit, carrying this thing, with this thing being on fire, and this other thing doing this, and it's an extraordinary thing that we maintain, that we are the keepers of, I suppose. Extraordinary places.
I agree. I think for all of the stuff we don't necessarily want to talk about related to it, the creative energy and force of nature we've experienced in those spaces and in those communities, it's like, there's a lot of encouragement and resources spent on a dance troupe or putting on some creative expression with different modalities working together, and that sort of experience of euphoria that you can have from working together on something that's not for the purposes of capitalism, you could say.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's my positive feelings that I'm pouring.
That's nice. Yeah. No, I like that. It's I mean that's always a clash, I think, because I mean I've never been paid for anything.
right. There is that side.
And the stuff that I've but that's not a problem. That's not an emphasis. That's why I'm not a successful businessman. I'm someone who manages to get by somehow, doing creative things, and and that's great. I wouldn't necessarily. Well, cool. Would I have it any other way? Oh, sure. I'd love someone to throw a load of money at me. That would be great. But that's not.
Yes, Robin is.
That's not why I'm here.
Large sums of money if you want to throw them. I'm not closing that door. But yeah, I know what you mean. There's something about
We were literally just talking about that last night, I feel like.
yeah, that's really funny. I mean, it always comes up, right? Like, would we trade what we do and how we do it for the large sums of money that maybe come with some strings, you know, that you maybe don't want to have to compromise about? So it's just always living in that balance of knowing that hopefully what you're doing is for something greater, right? Whether it's religious or not, just this feeling of like, there is something greater than just this moment we're in and this dollar we need to make right now.
Yeah, no, I would agree. Yeah, 100%. And finding what that is that journey of life, isn't it? I mean, it's yeah, I have I mean, I don't want to embrace necessarily a very sort of well-meant or simple or simplistic view of life, because life is hard and it's difficult, and it's not an Instagram meme. You know, you can't wake up in the morning and feel this is it. You know, this is the day I'm going to give it my 100% and I will be rewarded. You know, I don't really believe that happens. I think we mostly struggle on and we grin and bear it, and you have moments of happiness and it's and moments of pain, but I think the positive mindset perhaps idea is to see those moments of joy and try to draw a path to it, you know, and try to find the next one and the next one. And I think if nothing else, music is a route, or it's a boat by which we can travel to these moments of joy in this fleeting existence that we have.
Oh yes, this is definitely hitting on a lot of, you know, it can look like we're out here just making videos and putting content on the internet, but behind it is all of this intentionality and this deep thought about what it all really means and how you draw that path, not just like for your own joy, but I think specifically music and the way we're all kind of connected here, sharing it through the internet. It's like we're in this boat, but we're all like being able to sync up with each other. And when those moments happen, it like the swell of that is kind of what we all live for, is those spark moments when it really happens with other people. Someone else is experiencing it with you.
Seems to come into alignment.
Takes it to that next level. Yes, that was beautiful. My goodness, we're here to talk about synths, right?
Yeah,
we can't help ourselves but to go here.
Yeah, absolutely. So my next pathway that opened up was partly it's a mixture of all things. It's a mixture of the computer thing kind of failing, I suppose, and therefore having to make decisions. It was a mixture of the YouTube channel working, but I mean, I have to say that having slogged my guts out now on the YouTube channel, it still doesn't really make any serious money. I know there are people out there who can make that work, and they are awesome, but no, it still doesn't. But it's annoying enough so that it produces just enough for me to go, oh well, you know, it would be a shame to let that go because there's a couple of £100 there, you know, and that's nothing to be sneezed at. So there's just enough to keep you on that hook, you know, but not enough for you to go, right, let's do this full time because that's going to work. So, you know, that's a little bit anyway. So there's all these
pieces of the pie, right?
Yeah, all these pieces of the pie. So that's trucking along. So that's interesting. But at the same time, I am so desperately bored with making music through my computer. Having done a few albums of it and doing the whole lot on the computer, and that being awesome, you know, a little bit of guitar, but mostly all on the computer. And now at a stage where people are sending me bits of software to review, because, you know, for the channel or just to write about, and it's just like, I'm so bored. and I'm clicking, you know, and I'm clicking through presets and clicking through samples, and I just don't really care anymore. And that was also starting to reflect into the music that I was doing for these services. I started off with just a laptop, which then moved to a Surface. And so I was moving from a launch pad, I suppose, Ableton Live launch pad, into a touchscreen. And that was suddenly slightly more dangerous and slightly more interesting. I quite liked that. And then trying to remember what it was that came next. I think it was a Base Station 2 just popped up. It was like I had a good deal on a bass station 2 somewhere, and I thought, what I really need, I need to be able to play a synth live. I just want to be able to get onto a filter and do something. And so I used a bass station 2 as my controller keyboard. So I had
The
that and the
original bass
laptop.
station was one that I was going to throw out there as a possibility for being in that turnkey rack.
Yes, it was. Absolutely, it was.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That was a popular one.
It was there on the right. On the left were all the EMU Protuses and Orbits and Planet Fats and all those crazy romplers. And on the right was, definitely a bass station. Absolutely. And each section of those racks had their Novation little bass station controller keyboard to play them all on, I seem to remember. So that's what was in my head, but I just ended up having the synth built into it with the bass station 2, which is the same keyboard. So that came along, and suddenly I was doing little filter sweeps as the bass line was playing with Bitwig and everything else going off. And so that happened. And then I think I got a Mother 32. And so this is starting to sort of come right up to speed. So I just found myself spilling out of the computer, basically. I was so bored with clicking on stuff. I just wanted something for my hands to do. I'd done a lot on the touchscreen, but there was no haptic feedback. There was no, it worked. It was good. And I sold it as best I could as an interesting way of doing multi-touch on things, but so few manufacturers are really taking it on that you really only ever got one finger stuff going on. And so that wasn't that interesting. You could actually do it more accurately with a mouse. But anyway, so I was just coming up against this brick wall and just needed to start spilling out. And so I did. And at the same time, I got this gig with Gear News, this news website, this brand new news website at the time. Okay. And I came on board for what I assumed would be writing about audio interfaces and software, because that's my thing, and I was so super excited. No, I was excited because it meant I could perhaps make a living writing rather than making computers. So this was the thing that got me out of that hole I was in, I think. Right. And so I started up doing that, and quickly realized that they actually wanted me to write about all the synthesizers. And I was going, oh, right, crikey, synthesizers. I hadn't thought about hardware synthesizers. Right, hardware synthesizers. So I hadn't really thought about that for a long time. I'm the software guy. Everything went software, and I went with it. And I was everything in software. So the idea of having something now outside seemed kind of odd and quaint almost. And so I realized I didn't really know a whole lot about current gear. So I had to do a lot of reading, a lot of watching. And I realized that this stuff was going on. Everyone was feeling it. This idea that of a tactile interface, of hardware, of analog, of all these things that we thought were forgotten. Because I remember everyone shunning analog synthesis for digital synthesis.
Oh,
we wanted
like
those. We wanted that M1 sound where you pressed a couple of keys and you got the birds singing and things moving around and the pads and the drums coming in. For some reason, we wanted all of that, and we didn't want to edit it. We didn't want to change anything. We just wanted to play the sounds as they were. And I don't know why we wanted that, but that seemed to be what we wanted. And so it was weird finding ourselves back with knobs and back with sliders. And it wasn't just in the stuff that was unreachable, in the really expensive stuff. It was happening all the time. And of course, this also meant Modular and Eurorack. Now, I hadn't thought about Modular since university when they had the Moog there, yes. Which had these enormous cables, and you plugged a couple of things in, and it didn't do. For heaven's sake, you got like 8 notes out of a sequence. It's like, what's the point of that? I want a Fairlight that's got multiple tracks of 16, this, that, and the other, and all this stuff going on. I didn't
play some seventh chords.
I didn't tie into that at all. But coming back to it now, having come out the other end of the software, my software environment, it was like a massive release of this external gear. Being able to look away from my screen, take my hand off the mouse, and just start making music without any reference to the computer at all was just bloody marvelous. And it recaptured some of the joy that I undoubtedly lost in my in the pain of going through the loss of this business that I was trying to do, the building of computers, and trying to reconcile all of that with what I'm doing now and where am I going, and to suddenly have this huge spark of, now this is really interesting, and this, it connects with me on a writing about, oh, what's that? Right, help. Writing about something point of view, but it also connects with me creatively and physically, viscerally. It's blood and guts, it's everything. Is under your fingertips, and that was fascinating. So I mean, I've come across Eurorack before, because I remember in Dofa used to do the Frankfurt Music Messe show, and I used to go there as part of my job, seeking out new bits of software to distribute or new products and stuff. Like, I would go on behalf of Turnkey to Frankfurt and do the Music Messe show.
Is that still going?
No, it's kind of I think COVID finished it off, basically.
Oh, okay.
But I think they still probably going to do it in terms of umpar band stuff, because you had 3 floors of accordions and sousaphones and all sorts of proper European instruments,
Right.
as opposed to the other stuff. But they used to do that show, and they had this booth, which then became a few of them, which then became this super booth at Frankfurt, which then of course transplanted itself out to become Super Booth.
Oh, so, that's right. So it was sort of like the precursor to Super Booth.
Yeah. But but again, I had no interest in it. It was just a whole bunch of little weeny lights spinning about, little tiny knobs and stuff. It's like, no, where's the software guy? I want to look at Spectrasonic's latest thing. I'm gonna go and have dinner with Native Instruments. Get this stuff out of the way. So so coming back to it later was kind of odd, but at the same time familiar. So in an effort, so I was having to write about this stuff and have to know something about it. So I went along to this new synth event in Sheffield, funnily enough, called Synth Fest, which is put on by Sound on Sound magazine. And I thought, well, I'll go along there and have a look. So I went along and found myself amongst the Eurorack community, so to say. And Gotcha. It was, again, my third transformational moment, perhaps. And I thought it was just completely brilliant. I mean, I was baffled by it, because I would go around, because I knew synthesizers. I had plenty of synthesizers, had played with plenty in the shop and stuff. And so I could go from store to store. There's plenty of places. There was the Make Noise No Coast, there was the Mother 32, there was the Erebus Dreadbox. Great little synths, and I could go over and I could make noises, and thought, well, this is great. I love these little things. This is brilliant. Yeah, this is nice. It's just like my base station 2. I can program some stuff in. Great. That's really good. What this modular stuff is, I don't have any clue. That looks too scary. How could you? I didn't even know how to ask. How do I ask? What, because you could go up to it and look at it and go, I mean, if I turn something, has it changed anything? I have no idea. I don't know. Have I broken it? Sorry. And, and that sort of thing. And it seemed to be that you had to ask questions in order to even enter into the space. But that, of course, meant speaking to somebody. I don't know, speaking to somebody. I don't know. So, but luckily there were people there who were happy to talk to me. I mean, one person in particular who I always bring up. Poor woman is probably fed up with this by now, but there was this lady there called Chelsea Bruno, who goes by the name Eden Gray. Do you know Eden Gray? Any chance?
I don't think
no,
so.
Modular artist, but she was studying for a master's in essentially modular synthesis, or in synthesis at the time, and she was just there as part of the community of people showing, this is my modular, and she had just 2 rows of stuff, and it was going bleepy bleepy bleepy, and she was in a part of the show that there was nobody else there, so I just sort of wandered around, and so there was no pressure, and I just sort of hung out for a bit and started talking to her. And as she was chatting to me, she was just repatching and taking things out and making new sounds. And I'm going, how are you doing that? She said, well, I don't know, I'm just like plugging this in here and this, and that goes. And our conversation continued, and I was completely enchanted by this machine that she was manipulating. And it was just amazing. And I felt that this is something that there's something really important here that I don't understand. And I imagine there's lots of people who probably don't understand or aren't even aware of that this exists. And how do I get started? How does one start with this? And she didn't really have any particular advice on that. At least I don't remember any. But it really sort of it lit up a few fireflies at the back of my brain, thinking, well, how does anybody do this? How do you do this? And luckily enough, there was a seminar going on at the Synth Fest that was being brought by DivKid and a couple of other people who was a how to get started in modular seminar. I thought, great,
questions
perfect.
Answered.
Yeah. So I sat down and listened to this thing for 3/4 of an hour, and I was none the wiser. I had no idea what they were talking about. They spoke a language that didn't mean anything. They seemed to spend half an hour talking about power supplies and ampage and the terrible things that happen if you don't have enough amps. And I was thinking there, why would you not have enough amps? Why is that a problem? What? Anyway, so I just thought,
more questions.
Just what's an HP?
I don't understand. Yeah. Simple things. I had no clue what any of it meant. So I went sort of home and wrote up things. This is when I bought the Mother 32, because I thought I'm going to have to start somewhere. And so that seemed to be,
keeps being the one
it's a gateway.
Yeah,
because it makes sense. As in, it makes sense as a synthesizer, so I understand it to start with. It potentially lets me patch, and it's got flipping Moog written on it. I mean, it has all those things going for it. So so I went home and just thought about it, and I thought, there's probably a lot of people who would like to get into this but just don't know how to start, and I was definitely one of them. But what I had learnt is that one of my skills or something over the years is that I'm good at explaining things. So when it comes to computers, for instance, I found through lots and lots and lots of practice that I'm very good at talking people through difficult computer concepts. So how to get MIDI to run, how to get audio to run, what they mean, how they interact with each other, how they are different, how that works through the protocols of your computer. All of these things I had explained all of my professional life to people. And so I felt I was in a good position to be able to perhaps unravel what this is about. And through my internet searching as well, again, information was difficult because it required quite a high level of scientific understanding, electronics understanding, just to even have a conversation. And so I thought, this is something that I could tackle. If I can understand it, if I can just grasp some of this, then I think I'd be able to articulate this to a lot of people and bring that bar down. Because there's, so many times I found, I mean, certainly in computers, there's such a high bar to get into understanding it. And similarly, I have this aversion to gatekeeping, in that I had to fight with Apple all of the time. I was fighting with Apple users who were just, I don't know, I mean, perhaps just distinctly unkind people. I think it is when they encounter someone who uses Windows, some switch goes on in their head that just turns them into these terrible snobs. But hey, everyone's each to their own. But what I mean is that there is a snobbery, there is a hierarchy, there is a gatekeeping often in music technology, in music, in life, one can say, but particularly in these sorts of creative arts, because there's a prestige in knowing how to do something. And you don't want everyone to have all this gear. You don't want everyone to be able to do these things, or at least that's often the professional view. You want to maintain your position as a professional, and that means that other people actually don't really have the right to have all this stuff. But I had already been through those ideas with computers, because you weren't supposed to be able to use classic old synths or compressors or Pro Tools or all these sorts of things. But actually you can. You could use a freeware DAW and freeware plugins and produce an album in your bedroom. You could absolutely do that. And I was a fan and a supporter and an evangelist for that kind of thing. And so I brought that to bear, I think, on my decision to wade in to Modular in the way that I did. And so the plan became that I'm just going to produce a series of videos that follow my journey into this. So as soon as I find something out, I'll make a video on it and try to use that as a stepping stone to the next thing and to the next thing, in the hope that I can bring more people into this fascinating community. So there you go. So we finally got to the point where, look at that, only an hour and a bit in. Finally got into the bit about modular synthesis.
Well, now we have all the backstory to tie it all together. It makes it more fulfilling. It's been interesting that the past, like, I don't know, I can think of like 4 or 5 people that we've had on who have said Mother 32 is their first kind of way in. And also, someone actually said, when people ask me how to get started, they recommend the Mother 32. So that's really
so much so that we've sort of adopted it for ourselves. We certainly don't tell them to go the Buchla route.
No, that's a whole other thing. That still remains slightly mysterious as far as I'm concerned, but that's okay. There's always time to learn more things.
There is like an abundance of avenues to explore now.
It's gotten worse over time too.
But there's just the gatekeeping, I think, is something that comes up a lot in these conversations too, because like sharing experience, sharing knowledge, sharing your sounds, sharing what you're exploring with each other is like, that is what it's all about. But I do remember that era where it was like, well, you have to have your Pro Tools certification, or there's only this like professional use for these certain things, and the idea that if more people have access, then it dilutes, and that whole hierarchy thing is something that I think we've smashed quite a bit at this point to where we are. But I also wanted to say that I think when we first met a couple years ago, or first connected, was when you were in your DIY, you were starting your DIY journey, I think is where that point was. Because I know you already were Molten Modular, but Gus was doing a lot of building at that time. So I think there was this, it brought it up that you were wanting to start that journey. So I think you're well on the other side of that at this point.
I think so. I mean, some of that again was trying to find a way to cut costs, I suppose. I mean, and that, because I mean, it's inevitable, it does end up costing a lot of money. There's no way around that really, but trying to find ways around that, DIY is certainly a possibility. Excuse me, but it has ended up not being the factor that I thought it was. I mean, in some respects it's because it's not actually that much cheaper. It's a little bit cheaper, but it's not massively cheaper as you kind of expect. But the on the plus side is that it becomes an absolutely absorbing side hustle, a distraction, if you like, something else to do. So if it's like, if I've come to a point of procrastination where I can't find anything, find a way forward to whatever it is that I'm doing, I could spend a couple of hours making a kit and just have a lovely time in that bubble of making that module, of putting that together and testing it at the end. And that it can be a complete experience of itself. It doesn't have to go anywhere. It doesn't even have to work at the end. It's just that process of sitting there with a soldering iron and working away at it. It's very mindful. It's very, it's quite a beautiful little process to do by yourself. And it's so different to making music. It's so different to playing with instruments. You are, you're, I mean, components are weird. I mean, in some ways I can't even believe the whole thing exists. I mean, what on earth what is in that resistor? I mean, how does that function? How do people think up this stuff? That you've got this little slab of stuff that does something to the stuff that comes in, and then you've got a capacitor thing over here that getting filled up with stuff, and then it's like the whole thing is some kind of witchcraft, but it's
Yes.
extraordinary, you know. And you're trying to, you have these components that go together, and somehow we've invented this, you know, humankind has come up with a way of harnessing the flow of electrons or voltage. I mean, I still don't really fully understand it, and I've done a lot of it now. I've even tried to explain it to people, but I don't understand why there's a voltage here and a voltage here, because you put these things together and that happens. But what I do understand is that moving, shaping modulation. I do understand how I can place levels, which essentially gives me notes or gives me movement onto something, or it's wobbling enough to create a sonic frequency that I can then hear and manipulate. You know, those sorts of things I understand. But the mystical nature of that PCB and those components is just quite thrilling. Oddly.
Totally agree. I'll be right back, but don't stop talking about this.
Yeah, and the fact that you know, like when you were saying that, honestly, like the thing that I've come to is I feel like the military has a lot to do with you know, the sense of urgency that goes into, you know, making such efficient you know, components. And you know, if you think about it, like military spec, for example, transistors, you know, are highly regarded for fuzz pedals, you know, now.
Right. Yes.
And you know, so it makes sense that, you know, that's sort of the sense of urgency, you know, that I've discovered, is that, you know, like maybe if it weren't for there being such a intense you know, reason behind it all, you know, we wouldn't have these super low tolerance components.
But also how so much of the music side of this was originated by engineers who were just messing about. You know, there were engineers who were working in radio or working in detection or all of those kinds of data management things, and they just worked out that their machines could also make a noise, and so they made it make a noise, and then they added other bits that did that too. You know,
it's coming because from all angles. Yeah,
it's this creative element that comes out of engineers who are otherwise just you know, working on their machines, and they find an outlet.
Just accidental discovery leading to
that's
mind-blowing
you
know, sonics that we all know and love.
Yeah, no, definitely. So yeah, it's been a great additional thing that was very unexpected. I wasn't ever expecting to be making modules of synthesizers, or making an entire synthesizer for that matter. And it has been again, I mean, it feeds into exactly the same thing. I mean, because DIY is even more nerdy than modular is. You know, there's a whole deeper level of language that you have to understand. I mean, I've had you know, arguments with people, I think, over just the usage of things. I mean with the sort of like the I think when I started the DIY thing, I would get lots and lots of comments about the crapness of my gear, you know, to the point that would make me in some way quite frustrated and angry. It's like, no, I don't need to have you know, a clean room lab. I don't need to have a vacuum sticking out of the top of a, you know, a glass chamber that I'm in order to solder. I just need you just need a soldering iron and some solder. You know, it can be poisonous solder, it doesn't matter. It's, you know, you've just got to get started. And because people keep putting all these roadblocks in the way, oh, you got to have this, you got to have a helping hand, you got to have a thing that holds the thing. And it's like, no, I mean, I know it pisses some people off that I'm there soldering on a wobbly PCB because I refuse to purchase the thing that I know will sort that out, because I'm so bloody minded about it. So I just want to show you that you can do this just with a 20 quid soldering iron. I mean, I've bought a better soldering iron. I'm not a masochist, but you know, you can just do it without having to buy all the gear. I mean, buy all the gear by all means if you want, but I would get very frustrated watching videos of other people telling me how easy and smooth and lovely this is, but they've got all of this gear. You know, you need to be able to do it simply, I mean, for heaven's sake, doing surface mount stuff. I mean, when I started doing that, people would just go, no, how could you pass it? That's just ridiculous. You don't even have a heat gun. You need to get it in an oven. And you talk about, I'm doing what with an oven? Putting a PCB in an oven? Are you mad? What is that about? Okay, I've come to appreciate heat guns a little bit more now, only because they're fascinating to watch on YouTube videos. But I still do it by hand, surface mount by hand, pair of tweezers, soldering iron. You could do it. It's not, I mean, there are limits, I guess, but you don't have to buy into getting all the gear. But I
In a
mean,
way,
that's
it's
also
almost easier, I think.
Mm.
Service mount. I've done quite a bit of service mount as well, and like I went through an era where I was building one particular item that was service mount, and I would just do it over and over again. I would make the boards and basically not make any money, just like sell it to people at cost, just because you do a few and you're like, I could do this all day,
Yeah.
I found that once you get into a groove with it, it's even easier than through hole because you're not messing with the clippers having
No,
to
that's
clip
true.
all the leads, so I liked it. I thought it was, you get the magnifying down and then it's fine,
Yeah. Well, I mean, my eyes are shot, so I always have to have this thing.
Oh yes.
This thing handy.
Amazing.
Nice.
I've got lights on the side somewhere. Hang on.
That's what we're really in it for, is the cool headgear.
Cool headgear. I think my dad found these in the back of the garage somewhere.
Oh wow.
They're probably from the 1960s or something.
Oh my
Oh,
gosh.
that's still on.
Nice. I have like a nail salon light.
Yeah.
for my surface mount work, but yeah, it once you get that sorted, it's really easy, I think.
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple of items one has to get in order to make it function, but and it's the same in normal modular. I couldn't understand why everyone kept saying I needed a mixer, or I needed this, or I needed an output module. I just had a VCA plugging into my audio interface, plugging into my speakers. Well, you can't do that, it's at the wrong level. Oh, I don't know, I just turn it up here and it seems to be okay. I don't know, I turn it down there, it seems to be all right. It's but I'm very used to dealing with pro audio people, and they have a lot of knowledge and a lot of experience, and they often forget what it's like to not have those things. And that's my mission. My role is to be that annoying person who says, no, you don't need all that rubbish, you can just do it like this. And that's what I try to do. But it's interesting because these sorts of questions revolve around cheap gear as well. And is that a good thing? Is it okay for everyone to have a mini Moog? Is that good? Is that bad? Does that devalue something? There's lots of conversations over the price and value of our gear, and those are always interesting conversations to have, and not often very nuanced either, which could be a shame, because there are there's valid there's valid discussions to have about what value means to a person, particularly to a musician. And I think when you hear very dismissive arguments about, oh, I don't care, I just want it all cheap and I want it all now, I think that's a shame. I think that misses an opportunity to talk about how we feel about our interaction with the tools and our instruments, and whether that's important or not. I mean, it might not, none of it may be important, but I think to have a conversation about why it may be important, I think could be important.
Yeah, I see what you're getting at, because it definitely comes up in it bubbles up, in whether in these conversations or in comment sections or whatever, that like you said, not a lot of nuance, sort of emotional, if you will, and what is being left out is just more of that thoughtful, it's so personal too, so for someone to just start shouting at you on one of your videos about how things should be, or, oh, look at you with all your gear, that's so expensive, or
but
no,
yeah,
we don't want the
Yeah,
I hate to even
but
say it, but the Behringer.
I
of it
love
all.
my 3 pieces of Behringer gear. They're honestly some of my favorite
yeah,
bits of kit, if you will.
yes, I have a couple over there. Well, I mean, I could have been that Behringer person. I think we had a bit of a falling out, and I sort of kicked my toys out of the pram and thought, okay, I'm a bit more philosophical about it now. But I think they gave me a bit of a moment. We had a falling out. They sort of insulted me on
Oh
the
no.
internet,
Oh, I
and it's
didn't know
kind of a
that.
bit. Yeah, and it's kind of, I mean, yeah, I'm just a bloke with a couple of thousand subscribers. They're a multinational company, and
Yeah.
there's sort of a power differential there
Yes.
over reach and impact and that kind of thing. And so I feel that they were careless, and that didn't work with me very well, I don't think.
That's not cool.
Yeah, I don't like hearing
No,
that.
it's not cool, because I did some really nice videos on the MS-101 and the RD8 when that first came out, their first couple of bits, which I thought were really good, interesting, and helpful, because it wasn't a perfect product by any means, and I was able to solve a couple of problems for them, that kind of thing, which was great. And I was all geared up for the ARP 2600. I thought, this is going to be brilliant, I'm going to do all of that. And I even had a case made, which is that one just over there, which is going to house it. And then this whole thing with Peter Kern and their vaguely anti-Semitic joke that it just wasn't right. It's just some really poor behavior that I just decided that no, I can't honestly align myself with this group of people. I appreciate the products. I mean, certainly something like the 2600, because I know the guy a little bit who made it, Rob Keeble, the guy behind the design for it. And he, through AM Synths, makes a lot of replicas of ARP stuff and Roland stuff and other bits and pieces. And he's a stand-up guy, he knows his stuff. He's very, very steeped in analog synthesizers, and did a bit of work for Behringer in order to produce their 2600, which by all accounts is a great piece of kit. But I just can't align myself with that, with the company. I think I'm able to hold those two things together. Great product, that's fine. Unfortunately, I just don't like the way you behave, and so I can't align myself and be part of that group. But I still, it's great products, great, that's fine. Those two things are able to exist. I don't hate them. I just don't feel that I can put my brand next to their brand in any kind of positive sense. So
that's a different level of discussion, right? Because you would be making a video to review their gear, right? That would be like saying you're aligning with them, versus having a conversation that's more nuanced. Like I just love that you brought up that you can hold two different ideas at the same time, and that's really what I feel like is missing from, if most of our conversations are happening online. That's not that space doesn't allow.
No, it doesn't
for that. And you're right, there are very, very nuanced layers to this, because there is behavior that is at almost a personal level, then there is behavior that is a business model, and then there's the fact that there are actual humans designing these things, and there is intentionality behind it, and there is accessibility factors behind it, and there is a lot to it. It's not really just this, oh, we don't like this one guy's behavior. There's so much more to it.
There is. I mean, obviously we've recently heard that Mo got bought out by Music, and that's raised a lot of eyebrows and thoughts. I mean, rightly and wrongly, I think. I've never met Jack O'Donnell or had anything to do with them, but I do know people. Fly again. I do know people who have worked for In Music, and they have varying opinions on how that works, and that because the bad take is that they just trash brands and nothing as good has ever come out of anything they've taken on, and that's not entirely true. I mean, I think what you have is someone who sees an opportunity and will do their best to monetize that opportunity in whatever form that takes. So in some ways they perhaps they're not precious about the legacy of a brand that they've acquired, and that can be a good thing, because if that brand is failing, if it's not making any money, then just doing the same thing is not a wise course of action. You have to do something different. And I very much lament the end of M Audio, but it wasn't really in music that destroyed M Audio. It was Avid. Avid bought M Audio and did nothing with it, and so it still continues to exist, although it has nothing to do with anything it ever was. But I mean, Alesis seems to be similar, but they do have a very good range of drum kits, if that's your thing. I mean, they still sell an SR16, for heaven's sake. I was selling SR16s back in the late 90s. They're still, that drum machine still exists. So does a DM5, I think.
I didn't know that it
sort of
still
rack
existed.
version.
It's like the micro Korg of drum machines.
Yeah. So but their big synths, of course, went, and their QS range and the Andromeda, bits and pieces like that all disappeared. So I don't know. I mean, Akai seems to be back on its feet to some degree after having a little bit of strangeness going on through that. But I didn't. Sorry, just to answer somebody in the chat, Madcap.
Sure.
No, I didn't buy. I did purchase a BARP, but I didn't go through with it. I cancelled my order. I didn't get one in the end. So I have I made the case, but the case is now full of Modular. So I got the guy just to put some rails in it, that as opposed to just something that would sit the 2600 in. So no, I didn't get it in the end. What was I saying? Oh yeah, in music. So who knows what's going to happen with that? I think in some ways we have this lovely romantic idea that a synthesizer business can be run by nice people who are paid well, who are crafts people, who are artists and engineers, and that's all beautiful, and we all have loads of money to spend on those lovely instruments, and that's all a glorious cycle of creativity and this, that, and the other. And that's a lovely idea, but probably in reality you need someone like Uli Berenger or Jack O'Donnell to run a company if you want it to be a successful and to get to a wider range of people. You need someone who's a bit hard-nosed and a bit less than friendly, I imagine. And that's a shame. I'd rather have the romantic idea, but that's not necessarily going to be a success, and we end up not having anything, perhaps. So I don't know, maybe nice guys can't run synth companies. I mean, even Sequential had to, in the end, sold itself out to Focusrite, but I got a lot of time for Focusrite. I don't know. It's a question, isn't it? And also, of course, there is cost.
Was that before or after Dave Smith's passing?
It feels like it was just before. It feels like Dave kind of put that together in order to support the company going forward after he leaves in one way or another. I imagine if hoping just to retire.
Gotcha.
Yeah, but I believe so. So don't know. I mean, the thing that's in some ways is interesting is that it removes a bit of that romanticism from Moog, because we cut them a lot of slack. So Behringer releases a copy of theirs, and we go, oh no, we'll stick with the Moog, because the Moog, they pay their people right. They have it's all built locally. It has this fantastic idea. They're all lovely, and the legacy and all that kind of thing. And that's kind of all just been swept away. It was an illusion to start with. The people weren't paid that well. The factory wasn't that great. It really did trade on its legacy and its name and the affection that people have for it. And so we would give them a lot of leeway in terms of the price of their products and those sort of things. And they made beautiful stuff. There's no doubt. There's no doubt about that. But now there'll be a lot of stuff we can't really cut them that slack anymore. So they'll have to either come up with extraordinary things, or I guess cheaper things. And that again comes back to that idea of value. And is that really what we want? Would we prefer to have the beautifully expensive aspirational things, or do we just want the sound? In which case, does it matter what box it comes in? These are all good questions.
Will they beat Behringer to the Mogerfoger return?
Well, I keep saying they need to put Mogerfogers into a 60 HP another 32 size box. One of those
Yeah.
could be an effects unit. I mean, like
Multi-effects unit. I like that.
yeah, like that Italian company have done. Who are they called again? Oh, rats! They did all they advertised themselves as this mafia company with this thing. It doesn't really matter, but anyway. So yeah, a multi effects unit in that style, I think would be a brilliant thing. They
Yeah,
should
it
do
would
that.
be really interesting to see what happens. It's very, I think, as people who like to look at the past and sort of origins of things and evolution of things from so many decades ago, that we have all this time to sort of see how things evolved and were affected. And to be in this moment now, it's a little bit, it's a little bit meta, if you will,
Mm.
because we're trying to talk about something while we're in it, and it's like having an opinion about it while it's happening, and you're part of it, and you don't really know what it's going to affect. And I don't know. I don't know that a lot of us expected to be in this, what's a good word for things are explosion, if you will,
Mm.
of synth enthusiasm and accessibility and production, really.
Maybe
Yeah.
post-explosion now, but
Well, it's like
finally.
we're in
That's
it, living it,
yeah.
out
I
of
mean,
it.
that's interesting about whether there is an arc or a bubble to this.
Mm-hmm.
And just to correct myself on my previous comment to Madcap, is that he actually said 2,500. Now, I had started buying the Behringer 2,500 modules as they came out.
Oh, okay.
And so I had already a few of those, and I thought I would continue with that, even though I'd said I'd turned down the 2,600.
Oh, I see. We're
The
conflating the 2500
2,500,
modules and the
yes, the
2600.
2,500 modules. I thought, oh, sod it, I'll keep on going with those. Who knows? It might be interesting. And it's sitting over there. It's complete. I have never used it.
Wow.
Which is really sad because it looks really nice, and I plan to use it. I did a video on the filter and the oscillator, which I think the first couple of things that came out. But I've got the sequencer now, all the bits. It's there sitting there as a dual oscillator potential standalone 2,500 ARP emulation,
Wow.
I suppose, synthesizer, and I have not turned it on. It's very, very sad. Or is it? It's something about that. I don't know.
Huh.
Maybe it speaks as a monument to my feelings about the whole thing. But I do
Can't
mean
stomach
to,
it yet.
yes,
Yeah.
I do mean to get to it because it deserves it again, because it's Rob Keeble's work again.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I mean, they're not brilliantly built, I would have to say. But it has the potential of sounding quite nice, so I should do something with that. But time is not my friend. I have no time. For some reason, I have time to sit here and talk nonsense for hours, but can I find time to actually do anything productive? No, never.
Why
No.
is it so hard?
I don't know.
Okay,
But yeah,
so you've got some
are we in the
support for
bubble,
exploring that. Yes.
or are we at the end now? I mean, it's interesting seeing how many YouTubers have kind of gone through their own shedding of gear or revelations or changes in direction. That's been quite interesting to watch.
It
Are
just hit me right
we?
now, but I feel like that live Ableton Live standalone push has ended
Ooh,
things.
He's
yeah,
calling it.
It's a shift.
yeah. I mean, that's
I was gonna ask you how you feel about that controller
yeah.
anyway, the standalone.
Um, I don't know. I'm not particularly. It's something that doesn't particularly interest me. I don't think, because I quite like Ableton Live, and I think not using Ableton Live seems to be an odd decision um, for for Ableton to make. Let's do a standalone thing that doesn't really run the main piece of software that we've built our entire brand upon. So I don't know. Not quite sure who it's for. I mean, maybe it's for the MPC crowd. Is it supposed to do that? Is it supposed to work into the Digitac crowd? Is it supposed to work into the Deluge crowd? I guess that
19-year-old who hasn't got anything yet,
Who hasn't been through this cycle?
who hasn't been through this
Yeah.
cycle, who's not paying attention to any of this, and they're like, "Hey, I want to make music. Like, what do I get?" Bam.
yeah,
It's expensive.
I mean, I guess,
but
yeah. Yeah, it's
But
not something that particularly thrills me. I mean, I'm still quite happy for my computer to be the end of the chain, although
Mm.
it's more interesting having tape at the end of the chain, I think.
Mm.
But I because I mean the way that I'm working now, I'm very much working with sequencers, just simple. um I mean, I'm not even looking for loops. I've never been. I mean, I've done a lot of performance with loops, very simply, but I've not. I don't see that as something I actually actively want to do. I like finding interesting melodies. I'm happy to loop a melody ad infinitum. I don't really care if I'm looping something so I can play it, but I'm not looking to create loops that I can then build into something. I'm more interested in either working on a single line that I'm just enjoying playing with, or a couple of lines, that level of simplicity. So when we look at things like 4-channel sequencers like the BeatStep Pro or the Black sequencer, things like that, that's plenty. In Studio One, which is what I use the most, I would have dozens of tracks of stuff, and none of it sounding, I don't know, never sounding anything particularly interesting. Whereas I can have a single bass line going on a modular, and it's just the most fun you can have, I think. So I don't know what I would do with something like the Push. I mean, I would end up making lo-fi beats, I suppose, like everybody does, because that's what you do. It's like, I mean, I've reviewed a few of those boxes for Sound on Sound. Like, I've got a sample track over there. I've got a circuit rhythm, I think, over there, and you inevitably do some kind of trip hop.
Yeah, that was what I was thinking too.
That's what you get
lends
to.
itself to that maybe
Yeah,
younger audience of what they're reaching for.
yeah, definitely.
I'm being pulled into the chat now and seeing all these questions, but it's reminding me that when we ran into you at Super Booth, we were sort of starting the seeds of the conversation around the Tip Top Buchla stuff and their art.
Oh yeah.
System. I was going to say system, but I was like, is that the right word? And what's really funny is I was rewatching that because we put it into our vortex, and you were telling us, like, oh, that's what I want to go check out while I'm here. And we were like, oh. And we immediately went over there after that and got the full rundown from them. So I feel like we're all like more educated now to talk about that after that first little conversation.
Well, word of mouth was alive and well at Super Booth.
Yes.
So, yeah. I absolutely had no opportunity to go and do that, sadly. I did not get the chance. I haven't heard anything about it since the show. So
amazing. I filmed a little bit of him explaining it. So I think Bess has it figured out and maybe could break it down a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's based off of the Buchla 300 series, which was something that basically never happened. I mean, it happened on a very low-key level, because I just said that and realized that one of our future guests, Mems and Associates, that do a lot of the they basically go back and they do a lot of work with universities, like refurbishing old Buchla systems, and they've kind of become like Buchla historians, if you will, where they have pretty much kept a log of like all of the designs that have ever been made, and by Buchla, and they know how to like authentically fix pretty much stuff that has
well, there's a lot of universities that are like, we have one of the original Buchla systems, but no one's ever done anything with it,
and nobody knows how to do anything with it. There's nobody who's like saying like, hey, I'm a Buchla
that's
tech.
A pretty niche thing
it's a pretty niche thing. And anyway, there's a system that was running that was intended to go along with that, where like you can get into some tuning and computer control, almost like I2C bus is kind of like how I think of it, where like you can actually get like say a rail off of your power system that would be dedicated to control instead of power, and they're utilizing something like that to be able to talk to, for example, the Buchla 259 module, which has like this auto tune feature. Without getting too much into it, it basically is going to allow you to do some interesting tuning if you had like multiples of them in your system. But the idea is that they're going to make it available to the rest of the system so that other manufacturers could also incorporate it into modules that they're introducing. So like Make Noise, for example, could, you know, take advantage of this and have their, you know, newer stuff like communicate using it. Now, like, I have no idea like how much this is going to catch on or anything, but, you know, it just sounded like an interesting.
Well, they created it to solve a problem, right?
I think they created it for authenticity of the module doing this thing that, for example, like I have a 259 clone in my Buchla system and the auto tune function does nothing. It literally, like, you switch it to that and it's like basically going to ground. You know what I mean? Like you're not actually activating a function of the module at all. It basically does nothing. So I think that the idea was that they wanted to make sure that it does the thing that it was supposed to do for authenticity's sake of recreating these old Buchla modules. You know, so it was like a 300 series concept that was available on these later 200 series oscillators is sort of the idea. It's so, you know, dorky to try to explain. And, you know, I don't even have Eurorack, so I have like zero skin in that game. So it doesn't affect me at all, but like, that's at least the vague understanding, you know, that I have about it.
Yeah, I think, I mean, in some ways, I think we've been here before. It feels very much like the conversations I imagine they were having at the end of the 80s when the analog to digital flip started to happen, because what I imagine, and certainly one of the
not to interrupt you, Robin, but we're getting raided. I don't know if you're familiar with the Twitch rating system, but
What's up, Zurich?
Our good friends, the Killer Bee Relay team, are bringing their party of 9 into our stream from their stream, and we've got some new friends in the chat, so they're exploding us with the
welcome
emotes.
Aboard,
and welcome in Zurich. Zurich is a friend that we got to meet at Super Booth also, so you came just as we're having a little Super Booth catch up moment. And hey, you, I saw you come into the chat. Welcome in.
I miss you, man.
Yeah, so this is a welcome to the Raiders and a shout out to Killer Bee. So I just wanted to take a second so you know, weren't talking while explosions are happening over your face.
We're having a Twitch moment right now.
Yes, it's a Twitch moment.
Well, how lovely. That's delightful.
Yes, welcome in Beowulf. Yes, so we're having some friend crossover here happening. Yes, we're chatting with Molten Modular. Beowulf knows who you are. I figured most people would. I was like, we're going to introduce you to a new person, but you probably already know more about Robin than we do.
Oh, that's nice.
Thanks, Killer Bee. Hope you had a good stream. Welcome in. We're just trying to talk about the Buchla, the tip-top art system for Buchla for Eurorack.
As I was talking about it, I was realizing how much I didn't really know. So I
thought you were going to talk about Vactrols.
It has nothing to do with that, though.
What's the story about the Vactrols? How did they solve that problem?
That's a completely different subject I don't even know. Yeah. Like, I think the solution was that they make Vactroless modules now, and that is sort of another thing that I think that, you know, the industry is trying to make a standard, is that, you know, like, because of the fact that they're not legal everywhere.
It's so bizarre.
I think we're sort of leaning away from them as an industry. So, but that is completely separate, I think, from the art system. The art system is really just this like inter-system communication thing that I don't really understand.
Wonderful. Well, I'm glad we cleared that up and made it as murky as possible.
Yeah.
But I think I was saying something along the lines of it was similar to the because that's right. I was saying that
analog to digital moment. Yes.
Yeah. I need to remind myself sometimes. I mean, as I said, previously, I'm always banging on about gatekeeping and bars for entry, that kind of thing. But at the same time, I have to remind myself that there are people who actually do this stuff for a living. There are people who make music and make their living out of it. And actually, you need to give them credit and space to have their own way of thinking about things, because they have a much more practical experience and thought process. So when we talk about, oh, it's so awful you threw out all these analog synthesizers for digital synthesizers, the reason they did was because the digital ones worked the same every time.
Right.
You know, the analog ones were always breaking down. They're impossible to keep in tune. They were so heavy and difficult in terms of when you were touring. And while we romanticize them because they're lovely and they're bits of furniture and they're awesome and these circuits and stuff, oh, just how great! I'll listen to them all out of tune. Isn't that fantastic? You know, that would drive clients absolutely nuts. You know, you can't make a living if your machines are always out of tune. So one has to be mindful that there are different levels to this thing. There's a hobbyist level, an enthusiast level, but there's also a professional level where things are different and things have to work. And you want to be able to recall your project, you know, things like, I can't recall anything on my thing. You know, the one time recently I did do a piece of music for somebody, I had to drop back to my door because that's the only way I could get him to come round and show him it, and then him to ask for changes, and then for me to show it him again the following week. I couldn't do that with my modular. It just wouldn't work that way. So as you say, the art thing is trying to solve a problem. It's not necessarily a problem that we will all understand, because if you're just fiddling around like many of us are, there's no problem. You know, oscillators go out of tune and you retune them. It's not a problem. But for someone who's working in a professional environment who needs things to stay in tune and to work every day and the next day when you come back to it, then some method of unifying the tuning of the oscillators and a way of simplifying that patching could be very, very useful. Although I feel perhaps that then just get yourself a normal synth the thing that I keep coming back to, because there comes a point where modular is just if modular is becoming a pain, don't modular it. You can do a lot of that through emulated synthesizers or even analog synthesizers, hardware fixed architecture synthesizers. You know, you can do most of it in that way, and it's a lot easier to do so, I think. But
it's almost as if these things serve different purposes.
Yeah. My favorite synth, for example, is still the old Nord Modular G1, like sitting right in front of me. That I would love to see something like that, you know, get made, because I feel like, you know, it can literally do anything. You can. I don't know of, you know, something that related to synthesis that you can't really build, you know, using that system. Are you familiar with it at all?
Not entirely, but I remember selling Nord Modular systems when I at Turnkey, but I never really got very deep into what it was doing. But I'm very familiar with the stage pianos and bits and pieces like that these days.
Yeah, but the idea is, like, you know, they have pretty much every module that you know, that you would need to make any type of synthesis, you know, from regular like analog style oscillators to FM to spectral oscillators, and you know, they take up various amounts of like CPU power, but it's up to you how you utilize them. You know, so you could say, for example, you know, build a patch that has as many spectral oscillators as you can afford, processor wise, and, you know, make a patch out of that. And there's, you know, pretty much, you know, there's no other synthesizers that are, you know, basing their entire synthesizer engine off of something like that. You know what I mean? So it's just super open and versatile, and also digital and very you know, predictable in the sense that, you know, every time I turn it on and load up the patch, it's going to sound exactly the same. You know, you can tune it, you know, perfectly and all that, but then it still has that really open feel of like, man, gosh, I could make anything with
this. Somebody mentioned Creamware in the chat.
Well,
we used to
another
build
ancient item.
Another ancient. We used to build Creamware systems at Carillon for a little while. They were horribly complicated. You know, it's such a sort of terrible user interface. I don't know. It was a struggle. You had to sort of rewire the entire. It was a bit like going back to the first days of Logic on the PC, where I remember getting. Yeah, I think it was Logic 4 was the point at which I got a copy, and you sort of got it home and nothing would work because you had to sort of build the DAW. You had to build everything. You had to create a mixer and create tracks and connect them all together. Yeah, in the environment, that's right. And it just seemed crazy to me why you had to go to all this work just to get the thing to function. And that felt very much like Creamware. You had to make all the connections, and I think we were forever saving different configurations for the customer to use because you needed to get sound out. And you're trying to test a machine, you just want to get sound out. I mean, it doesn't have to be that difficult, but it sounded better than anything else at the time. The little synths, there's like a Prophet synth and a Moog synth inside there. They were just great. All of them were really good.
Yeah, and that would be, I mean, how else really would someone be able to have access to that without having, investing in all.
And the good thing about those systems, at least, even with the Creamware, I'm sure, is that you get a bunch of presets, that really good sound designers have likely created, and you could run off of just that if you wanted to, and probably tweak them a little bit and make some of your own sounds that way. But then you also have the freedom of making something from scratch, if you want to go down that road, which kind of reminds me of like Max for Live, for example. Something that's super open, but also there's a lot of like pre-built modules that Ableton and Cycling 74 put together that are fun right out of the gate.
Yeah, there's a guy who I think was using Creamware technology to build the Dino Park boxes. Did you ever come across that? That's recently, that's just never quite. They sent me one. So the idea is that you have the Creamware synths, I think, but they're in a box. So rather than having to run it with a computer, it just runs standalone, and you can use the front panel to dial up the sounds. And it kind of works. It kind of does, but it's not. It's like, oh, this is almost there. This could be interesting, but they don't seem to have managed to quite do anything with it yet. So, and it's been a few years now. Maybe it's just not. I don't know. I guess people run out of money sometimes. It's a thing that happens. You can only go so far with these projects, but
until you have to sell out to InMusic.
Yeah. but again, it's a question of, do I want a whole bunch of synthesizers in a little box with no appreciable front end? I find myself back to presets again, and that was the one thing I didn't want. That's the one thing I've tried to move out of my computer to get away from. And so finding that again in a piece of hardware doesn't really thrill me particularly at all. It's like I know there's a whole market for people who like these big workstation synth keyboards, your montages and your Cronuses and that kind of thing, but none of that doesn't I have no interest in it at all. I can't summon up enthusiasm for them, whereas I loved it back in the day. That was what I wanted. I say that. It was that big. I just remember that big M1 sound, playing it in a music shop in London when I was a kid. That was quite amazing. But then I also remember playing on a Juno 106, I think, and not really knowing what that was, but just having a lovely time with this thing that changed every time I moved something. Whereas on M1, you were farting around with buttons trying to find the next preset, and you'd find a big combi, and that'd be great, but you had no idea how to change anything, how to play with that sound. Whereas you could with the sliders out there. So hardware, software, hardware.
Oh gosh,
I don't know.
Just go round and round and round.
Yeah, I'm playing with the ultimate. Is it the ultimate? I don't know. Let's say that, which is this thing here. Just doing a review of this. Yeah. So this is the S1. Apparently it's an SH101, and they keep saying that, and I'm going, but that's You know, there's nothing about that looks like an SH101. You know, I mean, this is a
This is what you were talking about, weren't you?
Uh,
It has these little buttons.
yeah. I mean,
yeah.
this
Oh,
is,
the RE, the DIN sync.
if I cover that bit up, right,
Yes.
see, it doesn't look anything like it. I mean, this is obviously the Behringer one.
Right.
Yes,
But,
we were just talking about this H101 on our last stream. That's so funny.
It was one of
Yeah.
our guests' favorite synths, or a bucket list synth, or something like that. But are you familiar with DIN sync? They do
yeah, very much.
old
Yeah.
Roland clones.
They do, yeah.
And they're doing an RE 101 now that has like little 303 keys as keys instead of a key bed, which I know is probably a lot of people have mixed opinions on that.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing, because when they say this is an SH101,
right,
what it denies is how good that interface was, because the SH101 as an instrument, what was great about it is those sliders and the layout and the fact that you could see where everything was. You can't, this is not emulating that in the slightest. It may sound similar, but then a lot of things use the same chips as the SH101, you know.
right.
So you're not really getting that experience. So I mean, I've listened to a lot of extremely positive reviews on this, and I know that my review is going to start really the opposite way to that, you know, because I hate these knobs. I physically actually cannot read this text. I can't read it. I don't know what to do about that. You know, it's like, am I too old?
You need to put
I
on
don't know. I can't read
your
it.
magnifying.
Yeah,
hat.
exactly. And so I can't write a review on it and ignore that. I have to go straight out and say, well, I can't read what it says. So, you know, it's a fail from that point of view. The sound is great. Sound is really interesting and really nice, and it's a lovely little synth. However, I have to start off with the point that, well, this interface is just not working, really. Yeah. I'm afraid.
The UI is a big part of a device.
It is,
you know? It's an undeniable aspect of it. And like you said, like I'm not necessarily familiar with the MS1, but is it the same in terms of functionality as an SH101?
Yeah.
Like with the little sequencer where you can play the notes and then it does it back and all that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That's what makes an SH101 for me. And then you can clock it, you know, like that's cool.
It's great. And it's got the FM sort of modification built in, that sort of thing. So I mean, because like the Base Station 2, which I've had for a long time, the thing that I didn't used to mind, which now I do mind, is the fact that knobs don't tell you what it's doing. You know, because it's preset, you can go through presets, and the knobs, of course, no longer show you what it's doing. They don't tell you anything. You have to move it around to try to catch up where the parameter was, and that's the same on any sort of digitally controlled.
Then you're back at a virtual analog. Yeah,
you are. Yeah. Whereas the MS101, it is what you see. That's what it's doing. You know, and that delights me. That's
the one thing that I feel like, you know, the evil B word company has like stuck to really well is the one knob per function interface for their devices. And, you know, I think that's really going a long way for them.
Yeah, it is interesting actually, because they're sort of authentic to a fault. So it's like, for instance, the Pro 800 has just come out. You know, it's a polysynth. Great. I mean, it's 8-voice polysynth, I think it is, in a little box, analog, and everyone's not everyone. Some people are moaning because the envelopes aren't very snappy. It wasn't a very snappy envelope synth. You know, it sounds like it's supposed to sound, and people go, "Well,
should they replicate or should they improve it?" Yeah, that's
exactly. And so Behringer are going, well, a lot of people have asked if we can speed up the envelopes, and we'll look into doing that. But you know, authenticity, etc., etc. So the moral of the story
being, update. I saw it the other day. They already did it with a bunch of other features.
See, because people don't know what they want. They think they know what they want, but they don't know what they want. They don't really want what they think they want.
That's very true.
That's such a good point. Yeah. And it's like, well, until they try to make techno with it, and it doesn't sound right.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, that's a very simple but deep statement you've just made.
Yes. So I wonder if you've got these banks of good cheap Behringer synths, whether they will stay all in tune. I mean, the problem I had with the RD8 and the the MS-101 when it first came out, was that one of the things I wanted to do was that trick where you can run the sequencer from one of the channels of the RD8. So the 808 drum machine running the SH-101 is the idea. So you've got a trigger out, and you write a pattern on the 808, and that pattern runs the sequencer on the 101. That's a classic, techno thing to do, and it wouldn't work on the Behringer. It wouldn't work, and I couldn't work it out. And then the great thing was, is I was shown how to do this by, oh God, I'm going to forget his name now. The guy from 808 State, the sort of the godfather of techno.
Oh yeah.
I was talking to him about it because I was interviewing him on stage at Synth Fest. A guy called Gerald. That's the guy called.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a brilliant thing. And I thought, right, so I went straight home to try it out, and it wouldn't work. And I sat there and I scratched my head and I forumed it and everything else, trying to work out why it wouldn't work. And the problem was that the one or other of them, I can't remember which round, I did a video on it, you can go and check that out. But one of them, the trigger that was coming out of the RD8 was too fast for the MS-101. So these two things had never been put together by Behringer or thought about. And it was just simply that if you lengthened the trigger coming out of the RD8, it would then work. So what I did is I ran it through my modular and had to extract something, add an extra envelope to it, and then use that envelope and plug that back into the MS-101, and then it would work. And so that then turned into this cable that had a capacitor jammed in it somewhere that somebody on the channel sort of saw me do the video and said, oh, I can make you a cable that does that, and then put this little capacitor in a cable. And so then it worked, because all it needed was just a little bit of delay, a little
extra
bit of
pulse
width. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. On that trigger, and then it would function. And then it's a brilliant thing. But just the very fact that Behringer hadn't thought of that and hadn't considered that, and their two machines wouldn't talk to each other in that way, was just like, it's kind of like, oh, just go, that's just typical, isn't it? That's just typical.
To uncover things here.
Yeah, but it was interesting. That's just right up my street. That is trying to troubleshoot something.
You hear that, Behringer? You got to hire engineers to make techno.
Yeah, and it does make you wonder who beta tests these things. I mean, that's a very harsh thing to say. So I imagine beta testing is difficult. It's a tricky thing, and everyone has their own idea of what it is that things are used for. Ultimately,
ooh, yes.
It's like writing manuals. That's one of my personal bugbears, is that manuals are usually terrible. And I'm quite happy to tell people so, because the person you don't want writing the manual is you, who've made the product. Don't write the manual. Get someone else to write the manual, because you will forget that no one has any clue what's going on inside your head and how you've put these things together. And you really need someone else to unpack these ideas that you think are so obvious.
Don Buchla understood that and hired Alan Strange to do the easel manual. So I agree with that philosophy. I've seen it work out for designers, and I think that's a good way to go.
Yeah, that is not
it's a symptom of our sort of one-man band Eurorack manufacturers, though. It's inevitable that you want to end up doing everything yourself. So it can be tricky, but that's why I'm here. I'm here to point these flaws out and try to help people along the way. Yeah.
Did you go to the YouTube event that was part of Superbooth, like the little YouTuber?
Oh, the
meetup.
Yes.
You did. That's cool. How did you enjoy that?
It was all right. It's a slightly odd thing, but it's nice to meet people that you've kind of spoken to that you haven't actually met in real life. So that's quite nice.
Surreal.
Yeah, it was great meeting Panic Girl. Martha. She's good fun. But and Bo Beats tries really, he puts a lot of effort, a lot of himself into those sorts of things. It's a great thing that he does to put on those sorts of events and pull those sorts of people together. He's a really good he's a splendid influence on our community. I think he's done.
He organized it.
Yeah. He's really good. He also, I mean, other people may not know, but he runs a little, what would you call it? It's almost like a YouTuber support group for us. So every couple of weeks, it's been a bit of a gap because he hasn't been that well, but every few weeks he puts on a Zoom and we get together and we talk. When I say we, I mean sort of synthy, YouTubey type people. We just get together and chat. It's not streamed. It's just a Zoom between us, or we can share ideas and talk about stuff. Yeah, it's really nice. And we really appreciate someone putting the effort in to make that happen, because it's so easily something that wouldn't happen, you know.
That's incredible. I obviously didn't know about that. And that's really cool to hear, because I think that's some of that, all of the unseen toiling and the unseen labor behind what everyone puts online. You know,
it's also the mystery side as well, because there's sort of new YouTubers there who are, you know, tentatively asking questions about, because they make all these assumptions, as no doubt I did, or I still do probably, and then I suddenly realize that people are making assumptions about me or what I do, as in they assume one assumes you make money out of these things, one assumes you understand cameras and lighting, and you have ways of doing things, or a plan or a script, or, you know, all these sorts of things, and they're asking you how you're doing those things. And some people do. All the YouTubers, they have different methods and different ways of doing things. Some people absolutely work to a script. I don't at all, ever. Well, I have done, and I don't like it. I can't listen to myself when I read from a script. I just can't stand it. So I don't do it anymore. So, but we all have different ways of doing things, is my point, really, I think. And people assume perhaps that you're far more savvy and professional and organized than you actually are. And it's good for people to learn that that's actually not the case, and that you're flapping around and trying to work things out. And do I have a light over here, or do I put one up here, or those sorts of things? You are just trial and error and watching YouTube videos of other people doing it, you know.
Exactly.
And you try to work these things out. I feel I've probably exhausted you and myself by now. I should probably be wandering off.
I think we've taken quite a journey here, and it's been really delightful. I do want to make sure we give you some space to talk about the Molten Motion Meter, or any other projects or things that you want to. Oh my gosh, we're getting raided again. This has never happened before. I'm so sorry.
Double raid.
Sander Klepper, welcome in with your party of 8. Thank you so much. That is
Robin,
amazing.
This is all you, buddy.
Yeah, this is clearly because you are a superstar.
This has never happened before.
That's nice.
So we have to talk about
well, I'll hang in for another 5 minutes then.
Okay. Let's just do some plugging. If you have any projects you want to talk about, or if you want to talk about the Motion Meter, no, you don't have to. But I know that was something we chatted about at Super Booth.
Sure,
On the docket.
Sounded awesome, and I'm excited to hear about it again.
Well, I've always got one to hand, I suppose I should say. Which is this little fella here. So I mean, hats off to Befaco, really. I mean, it's them who have put the thing together, but it has been, as things go, relatively successful little thing. People seem to have warmed to the idea. So the basic idea in a nutshell is that I just wanted to visualize voltage, visualize modulation going around a knob, because that's something that I missed from being a software guy. In a software synth, you've got an animated knob perhaps, or an animation of modulation going around a knob. You can always see what's being affected in a good soft synth. Not all soft synths do that, sadly, but a lot of them do. And I find that visual connection between what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing, I find that very, very useful. I'm not a very good listener on the whole. I'm better if I can see it happening. So when I'm sticking LFOs into my filter and the knob's not moving, there's a part of me that's slightly disappointed in that, and I'd like to be able to see that better, and when I'm tracing cables, see what it is that it's going to. And so I was putting together some Cosmo format modular. So this is Look Mum No Computers modular, which are quite big size. It's kind of, he calls it metric 5U. So the idea being that he just produced a whole bunch of modules, DIY modules that are big, so that he can use them live. So because he's a very animated, very energy sparky person, and so having big modular that doesn't cost a fortune, so making it in Eurac with Eurac specs, but just large format. So I was having to go up putting some of those together, and I thought, well, maybe I could drill holes in this thing and put a bunch of LEDs around the cutoff knob, and then that might be interesting. And so I was sort of looking into that, looking into getting some LED VU meters, voltage meters, and seeing whether I could just sort of somehow fudge that together. And then I sort of took the idea to Befaco, just to ask him, to Mano at Befaco, to ask him whether that was a doable thing. And he says, well, it sounds like an interesting idea. Why don't you draw a picture of it? And so we sort of went from there. And we just sort of went backwards and forwards over what we could do with it, what you could turn it into. What are you actually showing? Are you... so, you got a signal coming in, which is then represented by a circle of LEDs, but then you could attenuate that. Maybe you could mix them. Maybe they could cascade in some kind of normalization. That sort of conversation, and it sort of develops into this quite a good, solid, good looking, very sparkly sort of product. So, and that's gone really well. I think it's captured people's imagination, and I think is actually genuinely useful, because it does mix. It allows you to mix modulation or mix audio, and it does visualize the voltage, which should help you see the voltage moving through your system. So it works, I think, is the key. It was too complicated at one point. We had all sorts of normalization going on where you couldn't really tell what it sort of lost its original function. You could no longer tell what was doing what, because it was all cascaded and normalized everywhere. So we simplified it a bit, and that seems to have worked out. So that's good. Now available in 1U as well, both IntelliGel and Pulp Logic. That's the word I'm after. I was saying Deep Purple. No, that's not it. So that's been good. I'm hoping to do some more. I do have another idea bubbling away with Befaco at the moment. I'm waiting for them to get back with a feasibility on it, I think. So
it's exciting. Something
that's cool. It's even simpler. Simple ideas are the best, because I have many complicated ideas, but they're just too hard to actually turn into something.
Have you seen those cables that light up with the CV? Like when they have CV going through them? I thought that was a cool idea. I mean, I don't know anything about them or how expensive they are or anything, but like I'm just aware of them, and thought that was a nice way to represent CV flowing through your system. And I would personally love if someone would make some banana cables like that.
Oh, I see. That's a good idea. Yeah. I mean, there's been a few. I've got one here. This is an older version, which has got like a see-through end. I don't have anything I could plug it into where I'm sat.
We need a demo.
Yeah. I don't think I do. Do I? Would that work? Because it's got batteries in it, hasn't it? Is that got a thing? Is that a thing sync out?
There we go.
Oh, Dowie says they leach a bit.
Tiniest little bit of a glow going on there.
I saw it.
But they are basically unbuffered and steal a little bit of the voltage themselves.
Yeah, you could say that. I mean, you don't really. I mean, not noticeably. I mean, heck. I mean, I don't know what voltage is going through anything. Why would I care if it's 8.3 volts as opposed to 8.15? I mean, but I think if you're dealing with notes, non-quantized perhaps notes, then that might be important. I can see, but I mean, the recently a company called, I don't know what the company's called. They're called Candy Chords, I think it is. They do a whole bunch of very colorful patch cables, but they've recently done some that they had. Andrew Wang was advertising them and such like. They get themselves everywhere. They're very, very good at that marketing lark, Instagram lark, and they're
there you
quite
go.
beautiful as cables.
Yeah, they definitely would grab you in the feed.
And what's better about these is rather than having a whole thing here which is sort of lighting up, you've got just the halo around here lights up, and that's a much nicer look, I think. So yeah, they're good. They're useful. They do sort of show voltage, but it just ends up being pretty, I think, more than helpful.
Right.
I would say.
Yeah.
And that's no bad thing.
Yeah, it's
quite
just
like
all
that.
part of this sort of bubble we've been mentioning of,
Yeah.
just with more and more users, there can be more silly ideas that we get to play with, if you will.
Yes, because people come at it from completely different angles, unschooled angles, and that's important as well, because we all bring our biases and our experience to the table. So it's good when somebody comes with something completely different.
Do you like to use an oscilloscope when you're patching?
Again, I tend to use them in when I'm reviewing something, if I think it's going to be useful to see the waveform. And it is fascinating. You do get distracted into watching that all the time. And that was the interesting thing about, what did I do with that, I wonder? I did a review of the Behringer Brains, which is a Platts clone, I suppose. But they've got this display on it, which is one of their big new features. It's got a display on it, and it's good, except it's extremely sluggish. It's sluggish to the point that it's annoying to watch, because it's no longer representing the thing that you're hearing. It's always way behind. And so you're changing something, and then this GUI thing here is changing, but it's so slow and sluggish.
It's a laggy thing, huh?
Yeah, it just seems pointless. And you run it next to a scope next to it, and that's all bouncing around lovely. And this thing is going. So a weird choice to put something in that's just a bit that's so visually crappy,
right,
is a strange design decision. But hey,
is it kind of like the Korg mini log in a way?
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
but it
it definitely
work.
has. Yeah, it definitely has that vibe to it, I think.
Gotcha. Okay, I'm familiar with how that kind of looks.
Amazing. Shout out to Yapo in the chat, saying hello and love your motion Eurorack. So that's what we were just talking about.
Hey, Yapo.
So good timing, Yapo.
Thank you very much. Yeah,
it is a hit.
Confirmation. They're not a plant, we promise. Where can people get that?
In the UK you can get it from Thonk or from most retailers. It's harder to get modules into a retailer than you would think, funnily enough.
I'm not surprised to hear that.
But you can get it direct from Befaco, in the UK Thonk, in the States Perfect Circuit, I think.
Oh, nice.
I'm trying to think who does it it's Exploding Shed in, no, that's Europe, isn't it? There's definitely a DIY place in the States. I think Perfect Circuit only do the full version.
I see. Yeah, you have like a full video right on your,
maybe Synth Cube.
I don't think them though, for some reason.
Not
I'm trying
them.
to think it's something else. But
gotcha.
Maybe, I'm not entirely sure. I should know those sorts of things.
Well, I think it's probably easily Googleable.
Yeah, definitely.
But you did a full video on like the full build and everything. From the kit. So if anybody wants to go deep on that, that's on the YouTube, right?
Yeah, I mean that was also an interesting experience in doing a build video on your own module, because I'm used to doing build videos on other people's modules, where I can quite happily point out all the things that are wrong about it and say, oh, don't do that, do this, and they did that. Oh, look, there's another typo, or whatever. But this time around, I'm having to do it on my own thing, so I have to make sure that it's right all the way through. And it's not as if I've built 5 of them and now I'm going to do the video. This is the only kit Befaco have sent me, so I'm going to have to do it on this, and going to have to try to get it right. So that's been quite a challenge, but it's been good.
No
That's
pressure.
so awesome.
No pressure.
Oh, control voltage.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Are they out of Portland or is that the New York one? See, I don't even know my
I
modular
think that is
shops.
in New York, isn't it? Oh goodness, I
It
know
is the
it's all
Brooklyn
starting
one?
to run together. I think it is in Brooklyn,
I get those two confused, but
but I definitely know Perfect Circuit. I get their emails, so it helps cement the concept in your brain a little more.
yeah, that one I definitely know.
We didn't get to talk about tape, but
No.
obviously there will have to be more conversations then.
Yes.
But
It really warmed our heart when you got the reel to reel.
yes, we got the machine.
Yeah.
We bonded initially over that whole idea when we were putting our music out on reel, and everyone thought we were crazy, and you helped us kind of explain ourselves a little bit. And
yeah. Well, it's still the only a proper tape that I've got.
oh, I see.
Oh, it's up there.
To play on it.
Yeah. So
I see.
that was very exciting. That's the first thing I did when I got it back. So yeah, that was very exciting. So yeah, the idea that I would buy a package of stuff that had a reel-to-reel tape in it with no intention of buying a reel-to-reel, in my future, and then lo and behold, there I am getting very excited on eBay, going, oh my goodness, I've just bought a reel-to-reel. I've now got to go and pick it up from Peterborough. So that was super exciting. I haven't done enough with it yet. I'm quite it sits there scowling at me, and I go, oh, I just need some time. I just need some time from somewhere.
Oh,
But
I know what that feels like.
yeah,
They look
it's
great
really
in the
hard at the moment.
background.
Oh,
like,
I know. I was gonna
know.
say we could say
There's,
the same. As much as we, try to, having it as part of like a regular routine, having it in our chain, if you will, definitely made us do it more. But when it's not, when we're playing with something else, it sort of like it feels like it's scowling at you. Like, I'm here, you could be doing something with me. And
Yeah,
it's its
definitely.
own adventure, it's its own rabbit hole.
Yes, it is.
So.
And again, I don't know. I don't have enough knowledge about it really. It's one of those things where I'm just having a go because I'm a have a go type of guy. Because I think if I tend to find my own process, if I think about something for too much, I will talk myself out of it. And
Yes, very relatable.
and so sometimes I just kind of need to go with it. It's like at the moment, as I spoke to you at Super Booth about how I'm thinking of remastering. I mean, I say that word, I don't really know what that means. What I actually mean is I'm going to play an album that I made on the computer out of my computer onto the tape and then record it back onto the computer. And I'm going to just assume that it will somehow sound different and more interesting. And so that's a process that I'm keen and interested in going into. Now, parts of my head are going, oh yeah, but you need to find out how that works and what levels and what your dBs need to be, and you've got to at least understand mastering to some degree before you do that. And it's exactly that sort of thinking, which is good, and it's good and wise, proper stuff, but it also prevents me from doing the thing that I'm excited about doing. And there becomes a
It's
point
almost like
where
you're gatekeeping yourself.
Exactly. And then there becomes a point that I'm no longer excited about it, and then it's going to drift away, and that's a shame. And
just do it.
Yeah. But that works against this idea of knowledge and expertise, which I'm a fan of, but I have to walk a path that enables me to actually be productive, actually produces something. And once expertise gets in the way of that, I find that can become very frustrating. But so again, it's holding these two things up in the air, where I don't need the expertise. I can just bloody well do it. But at the same time, I respect the expertise and I wish I had it. And if I could bring those two things closer together, that would be great. But if I can't, sod it. Let's just get on with our lives and give something a go,
I love that. Well. It just brings me back to that whole, like, the drive behind why we're all even doing this comes from that sort of childlike curiosity. And I just want to touch things, and I just want to hear what it's going to do. And I want to try plugging this into that. And, we started this conversation talking about cassette tape and just the accessibility of just having a couple pieces of gear that just immediately you're getting that feedback right away, and not having to be stuck trying to figure out how to patch something and nothing's happening.
Initially, it came from naivety. And
Yeah, there you go.
Yes.
There's something to that.
now I have to
Ignorance is bliss.
meditate to get into a place where I'm ready to just try something. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
sad.
Yeah, no, that it's true. It's difficult. It's hard to recapture those first moments, because I know when I occasionally, because some I've spoken to other YouTubers about this, is that we actually quite like watching ourselves. That might sound weird, but I've discovered that other YouTubers do it too, that they actually go back and look at their own videos and are quite fascinated by watching yourself do a thing. And I find that. So sometimes I go back to old videos and I sit there watching myself and like hours are ticking by and it seems very narcissistic or something. Anyway, what am I saying? Oh yeah, so looking at some of my earlier modular videos when I've only got a row or 2 rows, and I'm doing extraordinary things that I would never think of doing now that that I'm overflowing in modules. You know, I tend to do certain things because I have certain groupings of modules. And it's really interesting to go back and restrict yourself down to something less and then try to do something interesting with that, because that's how you did it before. You know, just an LFO into a filter or into an oscillator was interesting. Whereas why on earth would I put an LFO? Why would I make the pitch go up and down like that anymore? Because I can sequence it. I can do this. I can run through quantizers. I can get that going properly. I can envelope it, blah, 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 blah. But before I had those things, I was just making pitch go up and down because it was fun. And then you go spaceship noises and then you'd mix in some pink noise from somewhere, you know. And I forget, or one forgets, that there's a joy in those simple first patchings that easily get lost when you've got a mass of spaghetti and big ideas going on and you're trying to get somewhere with it. So we shouldn't, and we should. Yes, that's definitely.
I love this theme we're keep coming back to of holding space for 2 potentially opposing ideas or thoughts, and how there's a way to play with that balance, but also, like, if you are feeling stuck, to remember to break things down to their simplest path, and how much you can get out of that, and how much it can light you up and then open you up again to those more complex ideas. And just I like meditating, if you will, on this concept, and how easy it is to get carried away with what's the latest, what's the newest, what I need to have an opinion about, you know, what's happening and all of this stuff, and mergers. And then you kind of you're like, wait, why am I not having fun anymore?
That's definitely the bad side effect of working in the industry. I mean, I found that when working in the music shop, you lost all sense of the value of any of this gear, really, because it was all around you all the time. And you weren't that interested in it. I mean, during my time at Turnkey, I spent a lot of time in folk clubs, actually, listening to old English folk songs and stuff like that, getting into that kind of music, oddly. But that seemed to be a good remedy, I think, for perhaps what I was feeling at the time. Whereas now when I'm writing news, being a news journalist or a reviewer of stuff, there's always new stuff. There's always new things to think about, and you forget stuff quite quickly as it's all passing through you on a conveyor belt. And so there absolutely is a danger that you don't appreciate things anywhere near as much as you could. I mean, again, it's this balance of things where, on the one hand, I have such a privileged opportunity to try out stuff and things that are given to me for free to try or review. You know, lots of people would love to have that, be in that position, but the other side is that you then lose touch with the value of that item and its usefulness. But again, there's a whole nother angle that, because I'm reviewing something, I have to spend time on it, and therefore I'm spending time making music. And even though it's only because I'm trying to learn a piece of gear or to write about it, it's still time in my day that I am devoting to making music, which I wouldn't have otherwise done necessarily. And that has been extraordinary. I mean, at the moment, certainly in doing modular, in the way that my channel has grown, I'm more creative now than I ever have been any time, I think, in my life. Perhaps when I was 16 and I had that double tape deck and Dad's synth, maybe. But
it's through the lens of the nostalgia, so it's hard to say, right?
Yeah,
that's an interesting drug concept: instant naivety.
Yeah, but it's definitely a mixed. It's a mixed blessing. Working in the working with synths and doing what I do is definitely a mixed blessing. But it is overwhelmingly, ultimately positive from my point of view. So I'm very, very pleased and grateful to be where I am, doing what I'm doing. Yes, I would say.
Wow, that was beautifully said.
Thank you. It's probably a good place to stop, I think.
Yeah,
otherwise,
I think so
I just
too.
say I can.
You're
I
so
can
good at
talk and
this.
talk
You're
and
like,
talk.
who's hosting the show? I'm not sure
Sorry.
anymore. Yeah, so definitely making sure I'm throwing your links in the chat one more time. I know most of you here are already very familiar with the Modular Molten Music Tech YouTube channel, but just make sure you know that Robin's also on Instagram, also has a Patreon, and I highly recommend going to the Bandcamp. I was really enjoying that music. Very meditative, very nice to have on for the day. So go to all those links, make sure you're checking them out. And yes, lots of love in the chat here. I know, I feel the same. I feel like, you're obviously gifted at, like you said, being able to explain things without having them sound like paint dry, which, is a real art form. And it seems like a real natural talent that you have. So we really appreciate that you spent time with us here, getting us all inspired and excited about this world of sound from all these different angles that you've had so much experience with.
Well, you're very welcome. It's been an absolute delight sitting here. I must have not spoken to somebody for a while, which is why it's all just coming out.
I know what it's like.
It's like I've done no videos this month. I've just had my head down in writing.
Oh.
I've had to really pay the bills because we did this crazy thing of booking a holiday, which is something we very rarely do, and now I've got to pay for it somehow. So I've been working really hard this month on the stuff that pays, as opposed to the more fun stuff on YouTube. So I haven't done all the usual talking that I would have done. So this is where it is coming from now. But hopefully next month I should get headfirst back into a lot more.
Amazing.
Cool.
Well, that explains it. Well, that was great timing. I'm glad we could give you a little outlet for it. We know what it's like when you haven't been connected with people for a while. I do tend to spill out like that. So thanks everyone in the chat for being here. Thanks to all our raiders for joining. I know that Robin was obviously the reason you came, because you saw that he was here. So we appreciate all the synth worlds colliding here in this one stream.
Can't believe it. It was amazing.
Obviously, keep connected with Robin and all the other channels outside of this one, and we will definitely look forward to chatting with you on those other platforms and keeping the conversations going and seeing what you're about. So, thank you so much. We will, sorry, my computer just did a glitchy thing as I'm trying to say goodbye and see you on the other sides of the interwebs.
See you on the other side.
Take care. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we always have to, to extract each other from the stream. It can sometimes feel like a violent process of like ripping the cables out of the conversation and just being like, see you on the other side of the tubes. Oh my goodness, so much love from everyone. I hope you felt that as we were closing things down. I know we were all starting to the computer starting to overheat in my brain.
We're not going to do a big wrap up this time.
We say that. Oh, thank you. Oh, Oxart, I saw you as well. Yes, thank you so much, everyone. This was amazing. I felt like there was so much going on in the chat. I was trying to keep up with you. You all were just throwing so much at us and providing so much, support and context to the conversation. Like I always appreciate when our guests are cool with interacting with the chat with us in real time, because I think it creates this other larger energy field of conversation that sometimes we're we're having this conversation and I'm like, this is coming from one of you guys in the chat. I know it is. Like, it might not be said, but it's like, it's all there for us to play with.
Being generated.
So you coming here and bringing your energy is like something for us to play with on the chat and the conversation. And I really appreciate that. And I don't want it to go unnoticed or unappreciated. Like, I really, really appreciate everyone being here and bringing good energy. And yeah, definitely Molten's return to the YouTube is going to be exciting for us all. Very amped about what he's got going on. He's always up to something new. And it was really, really fun to hear his whole story. And his whole journey. I appreciated that he was willing to give us his autobiography.
A lot of synchronicities too,
yes,
if you're into that sort of thing.
You guys have crossed paths a few times without knowing it. I think that's really cool.
That is interesting, yeah, because I definitely went to Turnkey.
That is so crazy.
Eric actually went with me.
Eric. Oh, when you went on that school trip. I thought you were talking about when you took the QE2.
I went both times, I believe.
Both times.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I bet he would have some memories about that as well. Once again, I'm just gonna shout out our raiders. Thank you so much, Killer B. I'm sure you had an amazing stream. I've been trying to tune into your stuff lately because it always gives me the good feels, and I'm sure if anyone here is not already following you, then they need to get on that right away. And I didn't get to see Sander Klepper in the chat. I know that sometimes when you're raiding, you're just like so burnt from your stream. Know what that's like, but definitely shout out to Sander Klepper for bringing your friends over as well, and hope you had a good stream as well. We are very excited. I feel like I had something to tell everyone, and I can't remember what it is now. Help me, help me. Do we have something going on or something that I wanted to share?
Potentially streaming this Sunday?
I don't really know.
Potentially streaming tomorrow?
Potentially streaming tomorrow? Okay, so we've been kind of talking lately about how we're trying to get back to...
Was that it?
I don't know. I'm going to just talk about it and maybe it'll come to me. That obviously we've been maintaining our synth friends and our movie nights on here because it's so important.
I'm gonna get a little more comfortable now that we're
so important to us to maintain consistency for ourselves, like that personal, like, kind of core value of consistency, because it is so easy for us to get distracted or hyper fixated and burnt out and all these things. So I did mention the Vortex, Danielle, actually, because we dropped the Super Booth interview that we did with Robin in the Vortex yesterday ahead of the stream so that everyone could get caught up. So all our Super Booth coverage is in the Vortex, all of our back catalog is in the Vortex, all of our instrumentals, our acapellas, like if you've ever wanted to have access to the stems for our music, if you will, those are in there, as well as we have the drone zone. So there's like a whole, like, I don't even know how many drones are in there, just hours of drones, and something we call the X-Files, which is unreleased music. So there's an album in there that we've never released. So if you want access to that, that's in there. And then anything we do in the studio, anything we do tutorial wise, we have our reel-to-reel buyer's guide, which is something that came up in our conversation with Robin, which we helped him with when he wanted to buy his reel-to-reel. So we have like a video on how to clean and maintain your tape path. So yeah, it's hard to distill it down to one thing, but it's basically like the whole world of the Galaxy Electric since the beginning. It tells you the whole story through our music and videos of who we are, how we got started, everything we've done, who we've collaborated with, other artists, visual, what have you. And then, yeah, the secret music is really the fun part for me. We also have our podcast series that where we talk about electronic music pioneers from the 50s and 60s. We did a bunch of episodes that we were really in the zone for a while, for a couple years doing that. So that's all in there as well. So basically we created the hub for it so that now we can add more to it. So the next project that we're going to be working on is what we're trying to formulate right now, basically. So the impetus is that we want to regularly release music. Versions of that would be in the secret music part of the Vortex, but there will be publicly released stuff as well. So our goal, which I think we've distilled down, is that Fridays and Sundays are going to become our music making days on Twitch.
Which Obama's Weed Man, we're kind of going back to stuff that you're probably familiar with.
So when we first started Twitch, we were like trying to figure out how to make making music and streaming kind of converge and create a routine around it so that we would have productivity and regularity to it. And we did that, and we came up with stuff, and we were really stoked about it, and we thought we were going to release it, but then we realized that the way that we were doing it wasn't giving us the ability to mix and master and edit the way we wanted to, because we were doing it live and we were doing it to tape, which is the way we do it, but we needed to be able to multi-track more. So we actually took the past, 6 months or so, 6 to 8 months, to get different gear, which is like, I'm sure all of you know, is like such a process because it's disruptive to your workflow, and it's time and it's money and it's energy and it's research and it's trial and error. So it took us a really long time to solidify that, but we finally did it. And if you were on our stream this past Sunday, you kind of got a little bit of a taste of us kind of testing that out. So getting back to when we were doing like house music, basically, we were making like sci-fi sampled house music live.
People were calling it weird house.
Yeah, like weird house, alien house. I'm not sure. So that was the album we were trying to make, which we spent like almost a year developing, and we have, like 36 songs or something from that recording process that we did live on Twitch, if you remember those days. But it's kind of not usable stuff. So as much as we like it, we listen to it, we jam out to it, it's sort of too...
we got to come up with a different word than not usable.
It's not usable, it's just... Yeah, the Space House album. It's
rough around the edges.
It's sort of like something that we were developing, so like you would get to hear that development process basically, and some of it's really groovable, but a lot of it just needed we just needed to be able to multi-track, because like there's times when I want to be able to take some of the layers of my vocals out or not have that drum pattern going. We want to change the bass line here and there, and we want to be able to play around with it more. Not just the way we did our last album, which was completely raw, completely live, recorded to tape, can't do much with it, it just is what it is. And that was magical. But now we're artists, we're always wanting to evolve and develop as we go. So
we basically got an SSL Big 6, which allows us to at least multi-track some of the stuff. More so than we did. Like literally we had like maybe like 18 to 20 tracks going to 4 tracks of tape, and that was like basically a stereo feed coming from everything I was doing, which was like, like sometimes like 15 to 18 tracks or so, going to stereo. So I had to pre-mix everything in these headphones while I'm making it, going to tape, and then, Jacqueline's voice,
which I'm going to have like a dry mix, a wet mix. I've got layers, I've got loops.
Which was always just completely wet. And if she was going to do some shaker or something, then that level was fixed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it was just a lot of committing, like the most amount of committing, like to record all that stuff to tape. So now at least with the SSL, we'll have... like 4 mono elements and 4 stereo elements to play with. So like, for example, even if all the drums are going to like 1 or 2 tracks or whatever, we could still take them out and not ruin the bass line, the buchla, the everything else that I have going on, so we could at least compartmentalize it a bit without losing the analog mojo. So
yeah, that's been a puzzle.
It was really hard for us to figure out how to keep the analog mojo while also multi-tracking more, and that answer was the Big 6. So.
And the other debate we were having was, does this need to be live? The process that we developed over the past, like, oh God, 6 years is fully kind of this transcendent experience, if you will, that's really about being in the moment and like almost like channeling together the energy that we're sharing and doing it completely live without, not without prep, but without really, letting the song happen live.
Well, just making changes, like, like
Yeah.
taking things out, putting stuff in, like hearing like the builds and the changes and the way that, dance music flows, there's a lot of that process, which I know we're kind of preaching to the choir here.
Yeah. We obviously found our people by
that you
want to
be able to do in real time, and it's like when you're making a track, like, from start to finish in the box, it for me, it always ends up sounding a little sterile, and I can hear like my decision-making process like happening in ways that I wouldn't necessarily do live, so it's like we just want to be able to capture the magic of everything happening kind of in the moment, whether it's tracks that we've kind of prepared ahead of time or not.
Yeah, so we came full circle from that.
Right.
We spent a while, we made like 4 or 5 tracks not improvised, and that, again, it didn't yield what we were looking for. But the fully raw improvised, not being able to multi-track, wasn't working either. So it's been this process that we've been doing behind the scenes that we haven't really been sharing with you because we didn't know how we felt about it, to try to find this new way forward where we can bring all of this development process that we've done on how we like to play music together, improvise live, also with bringing in elements of editing and tweaking and taking things in and out after the fact, not just in the live moment. So that's my explanation for where we're at. Hopefully that was not complete nonsense. But yeah, that's sort of the backstory of why we kind of pulled away from doing music live on Twitch for a while, because we needed to figure all of this out. And we felt overwhelmed by the amount of music we've recorded that we don't know what container to put it in. So we were like, okay, we need to build the vortex. That was the next thing we decided. We needed to figure out the studio. We needed to build the vortex. We needed to create these containers and these workflows so that now we can, take off for the next planet, if you will. So if you saw our stream on Sunday, you got a little taste of where we're trying to head, the planet we're trying to conjure, if you will.
A microscopic taste.
A microscopic taste.
But a taste.
And so our goal is that on Fridays, we're going to start, which is tomorrow. So I'm saying that loosely because I'm a little scared.
I'm ready to go, baby.
To start that process again. So if you liked our space house music, this is going to be a new twist on that, but multi-tracked to the DAW, so that we can then turn those songs into something we can actually release and that you can experience in a finalized form that can go out into the world and into the vortex.
It's a little more inspired by Strychnine.
There you go.
If you're familiar with that.
Sonically, yeah.
Yeah, in terms of the beat style and maybe the tempo range, less housey, more breaky.
I like that. Housey breaky. If you don't know what we're talking about, that would sound so silly. What is the name of the thing you got for multi-tracking? Been in a full multi-track conundrum. I feel I would need to. Oh my gosh, this is literally, I feel like we spent months having this conversation. How many channels do we need? Like, we mapped out all of these different studio setups.
So many different studio setups. Like, at one point I had like all these Pharaoh fish, like, multi channel like ADAT interfaces that I was going to gang together, and I was going to run everything on a separate channel. But then I feel like it's like, then you're getting into like DAW territory.
You might as well, yeah.
So I wanted to kind of split the difference on that. And the solution is the SSL Big 6. And it, is just as expensive as some of those other solutions that we were looking into. We couldn't avoid, we wanted to make sure that we were recording at a high resolution. I wanted to do at least 24-bit 48 or 96K, so that was sort of like one parameter.
I felt like we were trying
that I
to
wasn't willing to budge on.
Solve a crisis on the Apollo 11 or something.
Right. We had spreadsheets. It was a whole ordeal, that we were going through for a while. And, we, as big of gearheads as we are, it's still it was still kind of like a mind melder, So
because it's also, you're not just saying, okay, this is the logical path I need to take. You're also an artist, and it's about, well, is this going to be something that I actually want to be using? Is this going to facilitate the feeling I even want to have while I'm creating? And then the output that I want it to feel like for other people. So I think that's why it takes so much brain and emotion power to figure out.
So now we've got it to where at least like each of our instruments that we are using live.
We used it on Sunday, so.
Have their own input on the mixer, which will then get recorded separately, you know, versus everything being summed down to a stereo track and some vocals, you know. So it should feel better, you know, even if like all the drums are at least being summed down to stereo, like I can go back and I can like recut a section using the same samples, and I can make that kick drum louder, or I can make that, you know, clap, you know, last smaller amount of bars or whatever we have to do. We can, you know, at least play around with it so, you know, our whole take isn't screwed.
Yeah.
Because we
definitely, I don't want to like get lost in the DAW on things either, but it's like there's these little things that are just like, well, this whole track is not usable. I keep saying not usable. I mean, it's still music, but
it's gonna be used.
It's like this whole track now doesn't feel like I can make it what I want because this clap is too loud in this one section or whatever.
Yeah.
Hey, Wambra, welcome in.
Yeah, I think we've covered it.
Yeah, I think that I was kind of amazed that we were able to like distill the past year of mental torture down to that little explanation. Yeah, sometimes I'm the aggressive tambourine player breaking the mix. That is sometimes me. So yeah, that's something we've had to figure out, and it's just, I think why I'm telling you all now is because we're on the other side of it and we're ready to go, and that feels good to me. And I don't necessarily like want to keep us behind closed doors while we're processing things. Like, we're happy to talk about it in real time, but sometimes we don't even know how we feel yet. So it's weird to like want to share that processing on the stream, because we could say a whole bunch of stuff and then later be like, wait, that's not, we're not doing that now. We don't feel that way anymore. So
sometimes the bukla was too loud.
Sometimes it was the bukla.
If you can believe that.
So yeah, it's about like setting the right limitations, but still doing what you feel called to be doing. So yeah, it's a lot to logic through, but it's something. I guess what I'm saying is like, this will be a new era, a new season, and it will be an experiment, as everything has been for us, to make new music that would, like I said, we have a lot of music that we could release, and we could say, hey, we've got this new album or that new album. And like I said, I even have stuff that I'm pretty sure is gonna come out. And we're still planning on that stuff, but in the meantime, we want to be creating too. So those things will sort themselves out. All that music that we made and what it ends up being released as is something that will figure itself out. But now we want to be in the now, and we want to be creating what we feel the now versions of ourselves want to be doing. And we're hoping that's going to be something that we can create live, we can mix it down, and we can release it so you can have it as a song. And not be something that you have to wait 6 months to get a full album.
On the system of your choice.
So yeah, that's what we're trying to hold ourselves to right now, is to actually produce tracks that get released in real time. Sort of that idea of like, we want the version of ourselves that we are now to be experienced in the now, and not something you have to wait a year for and then we're off on something else, because that's kind of what we've noticed, that we are always riding different waves of things, and we might be in like a real deep drone place for a while, but we're releasing dance music because that's what we had. So we're just trying to sync up with ourselves, I guess. Yeah, so live mixing everything to stereo was always the best sounding and feeling way to go for a record master in my age sound guy experience.
Yeah, I mean, I could see, you know, there's an argument to be made for that, and that's how all the old records were made, like, you know, all jazz and, you know, like
for sure,
super old music was made that way, direct to disc, you know, direct to phonograph or cylinder or whatever they were using, so there's definitely a magic to that we believe in, and we're trying to split the difference there.
Yeah.
And just have something that's sort of a hybrid of that mentality, and we believe that we've come up with the right system that works for us in that regard.
Now the creative process is going to be something we develop on the live, so that's the fun thing that you'll get to see us doing.
Absolutely, yeah.
And hopefully
that'll be real.
Hopefully
that'll
we'll
be
have some
unprepped.
wins. We may have some fails, but hopefully we'll have enough wins that we feel like we're doing
it may
the right
be a
thing.
little rough around the edges at times, because we are figuring things out, but we're excited to do that.
Oh yeah. But this you can multi-track in OBS for video if you use the MKV format, and you can get your stream mixes with no talking. Yeah, that I definitely feel like I need to level up my OBS a little bit and work on ways to work smarter, not harder, if you know what I mean.
I mean, we'll be recording to our DAW in the background.
Yeah, so there's going to be elements, and you'll probably see us like figuring things out as we go, and hopefully, there won't be too many lost recordings, if you know what I mean. Yeah, I might hit you up about that just because, like, I'm still kind of figuring out what I don't know, if that makes sense. I've kind of taken on the OBS part of things, and I definitely never thought that would be something I would do. I'm not super computery, if you know what I mean. But it's kind of come naturally to me. Maybe I am computery.
You're very computery, and really appreciate the offer there, Yopo.
It's just more that I like, it's maybe overly humble about thinking I'm not the expert, so I'm not going to say I know how to do things. But yeah, I've really enjoyed how I've been able to use OBS and learn it and have it actually function, and I'm looking forward to leveling up. Danielle, there's a lot of assumptions going around on all fronts. I think that it would be good for us to sync up about what's going on and what I might need help with. And I don't even know what that is sometimes. And sometimes that just overwhelms me, and then I go, never mind, I don't care anymore.
I mean, more or
I'm
less,
just going to do what I'm doing.
That is pretty correct, I would say, Danielle.
Yes, I agree with you, Mr. Spock, about what you said, and that's kind of been the problem, is that I'm kind of a purist, if you will, about recording to tape. I'm the purist about tape, and because I didn't go to audio engineering school in 1999, so I'm obsessed with tape. I'm obsessed with jazz. That's my origins of what drew me into music creation at all. So like, I definitely feel like I've communed with the spirit of the sound of music on tape, in people in a room improvising together, and the magic that you feel over, even from 50 years ago. So
you are the purist.
That's been my struggle, is like, how can I maintain that I feel like that's what's important to me, but still do things with the computer and make them accessible to people. I don't want to do stuff that no one can ever hear. I don't want to do stuff that isn't really being able to be mixed and edited the way we want it to be. So
I'm more of a both person.
It's about using tape and not needing it to be the only way you do things. Bringing it into the mix of things.
Like, I try to, just sort of use whatever seems like it'll work for the application. And tape is a huge part of the application. And don't think that we won't be recording to tape after we mix something down in the DAW either. Like,
Robin was saying.
Stuff is going to hit tape.
There are tape loops involved. There's sampling
tape loops
involved.
There's going to be tape on the back end.
Happy accidents can still happen. But that's been a process.
Tape emulators, there's all kinds of
That's
tape
been something
stuff
I've had to emotionally process through how I feel about that. And that's been a big process for me. So just being okay with things evolving is something I have to deal with internally. Because I just want to have fun, I just want to play, and I want things to work the way they're supposed to work so that I can play, not because I care as much about the gear itself, if that makes sense. For a gear channel, talking about synths. And I'm just like, I just really want to play sounds. I'd play anything that makes sound and have fun with it, especially if I could loop it. Anyway, yeah, so that's all to say that we're going to put Fridays on our schedule. We'd like to do Fridays and Sundays, but I don't want to put both of those things there and then burn out. You know what I mean? So we're going to slowly start with Fridays, and that's going to be I guess tomorrow will be sort of like our inaugural attempt to do Friday nights and figure out what it is that we're doing that we've been talking about here. This idea of making new songs, not just, free improvising, which is a spiritual thing that I need in my life to feel okay, but to actually make them into songs and do that on live, but not in like not feel like we have to perform a concert, but like kind of get into a vibe that might feel that way, and it might feel stop and starty to make the song happen. We don't know yet. So yes, we're going to acknowledge that Friday is a day, and we're going to see what happens. Hey Jerican, how's it going? There are no rules, but as we've talked about with some of our synth friends, when you've been in academic settings, or you've been in a space where you're producing something that has to go onto a streaming site and has to have a certain quality or what have you, that sometimes you can get so stuck in your head that you have to break everything down to its simplest bits and start over again and find that joy again. And you're right, there shouldn't be any rules, but sometimes you can gatekeep yourself.
I'm going to take a naivety pill.
Yeah. I appreciate this sentiment, Mr. Spock, and I feel like I would put that I would make that into a meme and put it on a t-shirt.
Pin it.
Pin it! Even though we're gonna call it at this point. I think I've burned myself out. Not burned myself out. I have joyously exuberated myself.
And I'm kind of hungry.
I know.
Are you hungry?
I did. It was funny. I got really hungry during this stream, and then I got over it.
Yeah.
And now I'm hungry again.
Yeah.
But yeah, this was a blast. And thank you all for listening to us ramble about the fact that we're just going to stream tomorrow.
I'm going to go get a bagel.
Ooh, I would love a bagel.
That's a callback.
That is a callback. I almost told Robin that we refer to Berenger as Kenneth so that we didn't have to all feel cringy every time we said it. But I didn't want to have to explain what that was about because I'm not sure I can anymore.
Yeah, that's a super old.
That's such an old
callback,
reference. And
but I don't think I could explain anymore. I don't even use that one anymore. And I was beating it like a dead horse.
Yeah, that was pretty funny. So, man, just another thrilling experience. As always, a joyous time to hang out and chat. And I just love y'all so much. And you make us feel so connected to...
You make us feel
so connected to each other, but also the largerness, if you will, that we're all part of. And it's just so awesome. I'm just so happy that we do this. Sometimes you have an idea about something, you don't know if it's going to take, but this Synth Friends thing has really taken, and we're so freaking glad because that has fulfilled us very deeply. We didn't even know we needed this, if you know what I mean.
It's one of my favorite things in life at this point.
Well, I know who we're going to be rating.
Yay!
That's very easy.
I got a preview, y'all, and it's going to be fun.
I don't think we've ever rated this person outside of you are now supposed to raid this person. So yes, I hope you feel all the love that you give to us in your own hearts, and that it uplifts you as much as it does for us. So we are all one. It's true. It's true. So I'm glad you all feel this. Oh, Danielle, that's funny. Sirich, I'm so glad that we got to see you ish in the chat. I know. I wish we could just go hang out, go grab a beer tonight in Prague with you.
Oh yeah.
Just to hang out. It could have been the LSD, but the truth that we're all one is just real anyway. That's hilarious. I don't know if it was the LSD or what, but that's always a good start to a sentence. Amazing. All right, we're going to raid into our good friend Toto, so get your happy emote fingers ready to spread the love. I actually don't even know.
Exactly.
Hopefully she's still in. Oh, they're doing a fundraiser. Yay. Hopefully this is, yes, we're Ambient Thursday. Okay, so we got to take the vibes down to the ambient zone and get ready for some good vibes with Toto. And we will see you guys tomorrow.
Take it easy. Until then.